Ellen Haug.
Guillermo Serna.
Glenn Murray.
Bill Bernard.
Thanks.
Oliver Boyce.
Thelma Cole.
Would you go in there?
Joy Bishop.
Thank you.
Gene Leffel.
Whoa, that was loud.
Harvest Thomas.
Carolyn Keith, Parks and Recreation.
Paul Hebing, Parks and Recreation.
Joe Sandoval.
Can't we just add him?
Greg Clemens, Public Works.
Okay.
Larry Wood, Police Department.
As soon as they're done with this.
Michelle Halstead, Communications.
Michelle Hill, Economic Development.
Jim Hayes, Community Development. Mike Weiss, United Power.
Troy Whitmore, United Power.
Ron Ashe, United Power. John Howard, Information Technology.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bauer, are we going to need to do another roll call because of Mr. Benson's late arrival?
I think we need to try.
Okay.
Just go ahead. Are your buttons flashing?
No.
They're not?
They are now.
All right, go ahead and just push your button. I'm not going to do a verbal voice call. I'll make a note on the minutes meeting. So just push your flashing buttons.
Okay.
Mr. Moreno, are you flashing? Yeah, you do. Let's see how that goes.
Okay. So we're okay? Okay. Thank you. It is my pleasure tonight to proclaim Sunday, August 14th, 2011, to be recognized as the 15th anniversary celebration at Buffalo Run Golf Course. I was talking to Paul just a few minutes ago. It seems like last week we did the 10th year. Oh, man, it's scary. I'm going to read the proclamation. Whereas the City of Commerce City opened the Keith Foster designed Buffalo Run Golf Course on August 9th, 1996, and whereas the course has received numerous awards and honors throughout the years, including 5280 Magazine's Best Golf Course in the Denver metro area, and one of Denver Post's Best Public Golf Courses for Colorado, and whereas Buffalo Run has hosted prestigious professional and high-level amateur golf tournaments, such as the Colorado Golf Association's Pub Links Championship and the National Pro Golf Tour Regional Championship, and whereas, to thank the community for their support for the last 15 years, the course will be holding an event on August 14th from 2 to 5 p.m. with free golf instruction, free practice facilities, and fun games for the entire family. Now, therefore, on behalf of City Council, I hereby proclaim Sunday, August 14th, 2011, to be recognized as the 15th anniversary celebration at Buffalo Run Golf Course. Be it further resolved that City Council recognizes and thanks City staff for ensuring the course remains a crown jewel of Commerce City for years to come. I will entertain a motion to approve. Ms. Snyder?
Yes, move approval of proclamation, Buffalo Run's 15th anniversary.
Mr. Diaz?
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the proclamation. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, a voice vote, please. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Could I have maybe council go down and present? Yeah, there's Paul. And present this to Paul. No, I get it. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. It's definitely an honor to participate in this proclamation. Buffalo Run has been near and dear to my heart for the last 10 years since I came to Commerce City. And so it's been a real joy to participate in the growth of Buffalo Run Golf Course. And I do feel honored to be associated with the golf course as well as Commerce City. I would definitely say that the success of Buffalo Run Golf Course can be attributed in large part to the vision of City Council, past and present, as well as the ongoing support of City Council. So thank you very much for that. I'm sure 15 years ago when the doors opened at Buffalo Run, there were some people that may have thought, what in the world are we doing building a golf course that far north? You know, there's nothing up there. But just look at it today, you know, with all the residential development and the commercial development coming. So, again, definitely because of the vision and the support of City Council and the citizens of Commerce City, the golf course is very much a success. And I believe having a well-respected championship golf course in the community does add quite a bit to Commerce City and the community in general. So, again, thank you for the support. As was mentioned, there will be a celebration on Sunday. So please come out this weekend. On Sunday from 2 to 5, we'll have a celebration with events for the entire family. We'll have some food and drinks available. We'll have free golf instruction on the driving range. I've even got some old photographs from when the golf course was under construction, so it'll be a good opportunity to kind of reminisce about what it was like then and how far we've come in the last 15 years. So, again, it's an honor to be here and to accept this proclamation, so thank you very much. Thank you.
You be a short guy, and a short guy.
I like that.
Brian, sorry you have to be back.
I always
There we go. Oh, excellent. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. Thank you.
Thank you. Sweet, thank you. Congratulations, sir. Thank you. You're doing a great job.
In response to Kathy's request,
Okay.
Renee's going to make a motion to amend the agenda to continue the citizen communication.
After citizen communication?
It says, I mean, citizen communication.
Before it or after it?
Afterwards.
Afterwards?
Let's do it afterwards,
Okay,
yeah.
let's do it after. Okay. It's always nice to do the fun stuff in the beginning. Anybody that's, I wish Kathy was here, but we have Dominic. You've been out there playing quite a bit. I mean, that course is just gorgeous this year. The rain has been wonderful for us. Staff has been wonderful too, but you know, we've had a little help from heaven. And really appreciate all you've done out there. I've eaten out there with my wife a number of times, and you know, there's never a surprise. And the funny part is, a lot of the people that are out there at night don't know who I am, so I'm getting the same service everyone else is, and it's impeccable. So that's really nice.
Just a quick comment to go along with the mayor. Recently, a friend of mine from high school got married out at the Buffalo Run Golf Course, and she just said that the service from the staff was impeccable and really made her night, which was really appreciated because you know, your wedding night is usually the most memorable night. So my thanks to staff for all your work on that.
Okay, thank you. Next item is citizen communication. And as always, we've had 2 items up there. one for non-agenda items and the second for action items listed on the agenda. When I call your name, would you please come forward, state your name and address for the record. You're reminded each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. City Council is reminded they are not to engage in discussion or debate, but may ask clarifying questions and express concern when appropriate. City Manager will generally assign staff members to get the necessary information to solve the issues. First person on the list is Glenn Murray. Good evening, sir. Oh, sir, would you just push the button? Thank you.
Hello.
That works.
Good evening. My name's Glenn Murray, 11010 Havana Street. I'm here tonight to talk about 2 issues. Please take my remarks as constructive criticism. The first one is the city has just recently purchased Wembley Park, the old dog track. My understanding is about $3.3 million. I think it's a major mistake for government to go in the real estate business, compete with private business, and I think that money could be spent different ways. Now, is all that money come from the city or come from the federal government, come some other way? I don't know, but I do know that it's taxpayers' money. That money could be spent in a lot of different ways that would be a lot more productive, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But if you think about what this does, the country as a whole, we're broke. You followed the stock market the last few days. We got major issues. I think you need to take a hard look at what your goals, what your responsibility is as this part of government. It really should fit under 2 categories, safety or services. If it can't do that, that part that you're doing doesn't need to be done. The other part is this city has spent a lot of money looking at their image, and I've got some real suggestions for you that would help. I've talked to you about this before. Drive Highway 2, particularly from Quebec Street into the main part of the city. Take a look to the north across the railroad track. There is fencing in there that is appalling. It is falling down. It has had graffiti on it numerous times. It looks terrible. The weeds, the prairie dogs, they're all there. You've got thousands of people a day that drive through your city, and the comment you're going to make is, that's not Commerce City. That's Adams County across the road. Well, guess what? Remember what I said, safety and services? Maybe you ought to clean up your own backyard. If you want to improve the image of the city, you've got to look at what's around you. And that is not attractive, and people say, you want me to live in Commerce City? Not a chance. Take a look at the people in Reunion. How many of them think they live in Henderson or Reunion, not in Commerce City? I challenge you to take a hard look at where you're spending the money. I think you're making some major, major mistakes. Clean up your own backyard, and please spend the money appropriately on safety and services for the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Flannery, you may want to get with Mr. Murray after we've been through some of our budget numbers, maybe to show him how our city has done in comparison to the country, maybe just as additional information. Thank you. Next person is Oliver, is it Posey, sir? Poise? I'm sorry. Good evening. I should have remembered, but I didn't, and I apologize.
Okay. I wanted to speak on one of your study items today, and I don't know if it's appropriate time to do it.
I'm going to have to refer that to Mr. Gaylor.
Study item B.
Okay. The policy that the city has, when an item is on the agenda, that that item be held until a discussion on that item be held until the item is brought up, rather than in citizen communication. So if you're going to...
It said action items on the other list, so I didn't know if that was an action item.
Because ordinarily at study items, we don't have public input.
Well, in view of the fact that the policy is that on a study item, it's only the city council that engages in the discussion. So I think in all fairness to the citizen who is here, although this is not exactly in keeping with your rule, I would suggest allow him to go ahead and hear what he has to say at this time.
Okay.
That way you don't get involved with having him wait and come forward to try and speak during a study item when he's really out of order speaking then. So I would suggest allowing him to
Terrific.
speak
And that
now.
works for me, not a problem. And that's the only reason I referred you to him.
Go ahead.
Sir, you have
You're
3
on.
minutes.
You're on.
Oliver Poyce, 3825 Northbrook Drive, Boulder. Good evening. Most of you have seen me sitting here in council meeting for the last 5 months. However, it's been a year and a half that I've been trying to open my medical marijuana center here in Commerce City. From the start, I've been getting the runaround from the Commerce City staff. Nobody knows how to process my application. Then I was referred to the city attorney's office. After 2 weeks, I get a call from the assistant city attorney. After a rather lengthy discussion, it was clear to me that the information I was listening to was skewed and factually incorrect. 3 days later, I came here to council for the first time. On that day, you, the council, instituted an emergency measure to block me from applying for a special use permit to open up an MMC. Now I stand before you. Why am I here? The city would like to put on the November ballot an excise tax on medical marijuana. I urge the city council to consider what exactly you are doing. First, you're putting the cart before the horse. You want to tax medicine, and you don't even allow people to buy or sell it. You are basing your idea of tax on erroneous information. As of today, there are only 2 municipalities that have an excise tax, Granby and Fruita. Fruita, Colorado, known for great mountain biking, a 5% excise tax that does nobody any good because they've banned MMCs. Breckenridge has a 5% excise tax on medical marijuana, but in Breckenridge, they have legalized marijuana completely. Telluride voted for a 5% excise tax, but the city council turned it down because they thought it was greedy. Commerce City would already be getting normal sales tax. The notion that the city needs to tax sick people is greedy. No other medication in Colorado is taxed. That includes over-the-counter medication. The average figure of sales tax revenue that you receive from your staff is incorrect. Many assumptions were made to come up with those figures. Those assumptions were wrong. Those figures averaged in MMCs that were not open for business. The characters that had been spotted going into MMCs, would you use that same prism when viewing customers at a local Walmart or pharmacy? These people had been given the recommendation from a physician, and a recommendation was approved by the Department of Health. Let's stop taking our preconceived stereotypes and applying them at random. Let's not pretend that the sale of marijuana does not happen in Commerce City. Let us together put these illegal drug dealers out of business and bring safe, affordable medicine to people who really need it. An excise tax in an isolated mountain town has a different effect than an excise tax on the Front Range. It is easy to go a half mile further to buy your medicine in a town that doesn't have an excise tax. In the mountains, it's a lot longer drive.
You'll need to kind of finish up.
Okay. My final point is the definition of commerce and greed. Commerce means the whole system of an economy that constitutes an environment for business. Greed, an excess desire to possess wealth or goods with the intention to keep it for oneself. Greed is an inappropriate expectation.
Okay. Thank you, sir. If you wouldn't mind, if that's a copy of what you've told us, if you would be able to give that to the city attorney and our city manager so that they can see some of the items that you brought up?
Absolutely.
That would be okay?
Yeah.
If that's your only copy, we can get a copy made. But
I can print another one.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bless you. The next people on our list are 3 of our favorite people. Do you want to come up separately? Do you want to come up together? Do you have a program? Okay. Mr. Whitmore, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And just so that people will understand, we do in fact have an item that has something to do with United Power, but what you're talking about tonight does not reflect to that particular item. Is that correct?
Not directly, no.
Okay. You have 3 minutes, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
And I'll need a name and address for the record.
Troy Whitmore, United Power, 500 Cooperative Way, Brighton, Colorado. With me tonight, I have Mike Weiss, our Manager of Operations, and Ron Ashe, our Chief Executive Officer, who you met about a month ago when the franchise was presented on first reading. We do want to tell you thank you for the consideration and the 20-year franchise, and it's been a pleasure to work with your staff, especially, and you folks to grow our partnership with your fine city. Tonight, in lieu of talking more about that, I just wanted to acknowledge that in mid-July we had some tremendous lightning storms in our service territory, and some of the areas that were hardest hit included portions of Commerce City. Reunion and Frontier Village especially were hard hit during numerous occasions, beginning on July 17th, and four outages that ensued thereafter. Most of all, we had damage to equipment from lightning strikes, and unfortunately, what happens quite often is residual damage will happen later on when we have maybe a large drain of power needed for the air conditioning, or we have some more moisture, things of that nature that may create another outage from the weather conditions that have happened. Now, this wasn't a case where it happened just in Commerce City. We had issues in Broomfield on the same evening as our first outage, and some other outages near Brighton and up into Weld County. So it was a tremendous couple of weeks of fireworks, if you will. Mike is here to answer any questions that you may have. I just wanted to make sure, since time is short, that you all had a copy of this report. It's very important that Council Member Teeter has this, since she suffered through most of those outages. I talked to her on numerous occasions on one evening, and was in contact with Mr. Flannery as well. So there is a summary of what's happened here, Mr. Mayor, and some of the things that we are planning to do to remedy the issues. I did want to let you know that our operations staff has thoroughly investigated all of the lines in Reunion and Frontiera. We did so in the last couple of weeks, and we've gone over all three major feeders, and we've opened up all the cabinets that are related to the equipment tied to the feeders, and you'll see on the back side of the handout that we've done infrared camera work to look for hot spots to see where there may be a weakness that could perhaps fail in the next storm or the next time we have a large power issue. But Mike has gone through that very thoroughly. We've been in contact with your constituents, especially in Frontiera, to alert them to what had happened. We did have a couple of calls asking, why didn't you have the patrolling done immediately? Obviously, it took several weeks to do that because we had outages in Broomfield and here and other places.
Okay.
So be happy to answer any questions. The experts are here.
And actually, it's not that I want to cut you off or keep counsel from asking questions, but this would not be the time that we would do it, and if I'll open it up, then everyone would need to do that. Sure. If you would be agreeable, if the council were to have questions, could they get in touch with you? We all have your contact information.
Absolutely.
And then you could get back to us with a list of the questions and answers that you were asked?
Yeah, we have had several summaries that I have given to Tom, so
Okay.
that's there, and be happy to do that anytime, not just during outages.
Terrific.
Okay?
Thank you very much,
All right.
sir.
Thank you for your time.
coming. Mr. Flannery, you're okay with working that way? Is that fine? Okay. Next person on the list is Harvest Thomas. Changed your mind, huh? Yes. Okay, well, thank you. That was the last person on the list. So the next item is approval of minutes. And there's two sets of minutes before council this evening for approval. The first set are the minutes of the meeting of June 13th, 2011. I'll now entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Ms. Snyder?
Yes, move approval of the regular meeting minutes of June 13th, 2011. Council is seated.
Mr. Daz?
Can the motion?
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of June 13th, 2011. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, request a voice vote, please. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. The second set of minutes is before council this evening are the minutes of the meeting of July 11th, 2011. Now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 11th. Ms. Snyder.
Move approval of regular meeting minutes of July 11, 2011. Council is seated.
Mr. Diaz. I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of July 11th, 2011. Any discussion? Seeing none, voice vote, please. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion passes. There's only one item on the consent agenda this evening.
Mr. Mayor, excuse me.
I'm sorry. I went right past that.
Yeah.
Mr. Bullock, you had a motion you wanted to make.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to continue the council business item on tab 7, citizens communication during city council meeting, till next Monday's meeting.
Okay, I have a motion to continue the item on citizen communication until next Monday. Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Mr. Moreno, I have a second. Voice vote, please. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same. Motion passes. That'll be pushed till next Monday. Thank you. Thanks for catching me on that. I have it written down, but somehow I missed it. Okay, back to the agenda. There's only one item on the consent agenda this evening. I'd be open to a motion to approve the consent agenda. Oops, sorry. Ms. Snyder?
Move to approve ordinance 1867.
Mr. Moreno?
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Will the city attorney please read the title?
The title reads, Ordinance 1867, an ordinance renaming the United Power, Inc. franchise, renewing and extending the United Power, Inc. franchise, and fixing the terms and conditions thereof.
Okay, I've had a motion and a second. City attorney's read the title. Request a roll call vote, please. Vote is 7 yeses. Consent agenda is approved. Thank you. There's only one resolution that was not included on the consent agenda tonight that requires a separate voice vote. It's Resolution 2011-37, a resolution approving incentive agreement with UE Compression, LLC. I'll now ask City Manager Flannery invite staff to come forward to review Resolution 2011-37.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. It's been the council's practice to have economic development staff come before you to present these incentive agreements, and I would like to ask economic development specialist Michelle Hill to come and present this item.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. It's nice to see you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. The incentive I bring before you tonight is a little bit different from the ones that I brought before you in the past. So we'll go into that. But before I do, I wanted to remind everybody that the current incentive program, the deadline is September 1st. So we do want applications for business expansion, home improvement, any of those to be submitted by that date. Also, members of council, I did pass out the worksheet separately. I apologize it was not included in the packet, but I did want to bring that to your attention. It was on your desks before we started. UE Compression is located at 6030 East 50th Avenue. They've been located in the city for a number of years and have been very successful. They design custom gas compression systems. The incentive I bring you before you tonight is estimated to be an amount of $143,000, and that is based off of a capital investment of estimated $10.8 million for a new building and job creation of 57 jobs by the end of December 2013. This company, as I mentioned, has been very successful in Commerce City. Last year, they started making plans to expand their operations and combine their operations here in the city into one new facility. The company was owned by a company based in Oklahoma City that was recently acquired by Kirby Corporation in Houston. So as they're going through these changes, Kirby Corporation is making an assessment of all of their facilities and operations now throughout the multiple states where they have businesses. This is one of those being considered. So this is special because it is a retention, a business retention and expansion incentive. We've been working closely with the county and the state both because this is an important company that we want to keep right here and help them to grow and expand. So the county would be matching the incentive of $143,000. In addition, the state has pre-qualified them, this company, UE Compression, for an additional $133,000 in incentives for job growth. So the total package that we're presenting to the Board of Directors for, I apologize, that United UE Compression is actually presenting to the Kirby Corporation Board of Directors for approval for this expansion project will total over $400,000. Again, the city's portion of that would be an estimated $143,000 based off of performance. So it is a rebate of actual sales and use taxes paid to the city and fees paid to the city for this project, for the expansion. And I'd be happy to address any questions that you have on this at this time.
Mr. Bullock?
Yes, ma'am. On your business incentive application, it says number of planned new employees, 30. On your worksheet, it showed a different number. Or maybe I just don't understand. It's number of new jobs created above average wage, 52, but it just shows that they're creating 30 new jobs on this on the sheet in the packet, and then a number of new jobs below average wage, 5. Neither one of them, can you explain that?
I can, and thank you. I should have brought that to your attention. As I mentioned, the company started working on this expansion project close to a year ago. They've been working on it for some time. Over the time that they've been working on this, their numbers have changed a little bit. They've actually already hired close to 30 employees since June 1st of 2010, and they are making plans over the next 5 years to continue growing their workforce. So our incentive is based off of 57 employees from June 1st of 2010 through the end of December 2013 to accommodate their expansion plans. In addition, you'll notice, some of you might ask this question, on the back of their application, the capital expenditures and facility improvements have also been adjusted. They had more grand plans, and then after they started looking at the economics of the facility that they wanted to build, they have cut that back. So the total estimated investment will be $10.8 million for the new building.
A follow-up questions. You said that they were a company that was held by United Holdings, and now they are being held by another, they were bought by another company.
United Holdings was purchased by Kirby Corporation based in Houston, Texas.
Okay, because on the business incentive application, it has the United Holdings LLC as the ownership company in the packet.
That's true. This application was submitted prior to the acquisition by Kirby Corporation.
When did Kirby acquire them?
They completed the acquisition in April of this year.
April?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Diaz?
Thank you, Ms. Hill. My question is they were acquired recently, obviously by another company, and they're considering whether or not they want to relocate out of Commerce City or stay in Commerce City. If they do approve the business incentive agreement, or if they do approve the agreement that we approve, does that mean that their likeliness of staying in Commerce City long-term greatly improves? Have you talked to them about that?
Well, first to clarify, the information that I've been given from UE Compression is that the decision they presented to their board of directors is whether to move forward and build the new building or not, as opposed to retaining the existing operations as they are. So they have an existing workforce here. They would like to expand that, consolidate it, and move into a new building. So my understanding from UE Compression is that is the question that they have posed to the board of directors of Kirby Corporation. To be realistic, anytime there's a major merger and acquisition, it's hard to tell what the parent company will do. They are assessing, they've made it clear that they are assessing all of the operations of their newly acquired United Holdings.
And just out of curiosity, do they have a timeline as to when they want to make a decision by?
I have not been given that information.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments from council? Seeing none, thank you very much. We love hearing this kind of news. So, thank you so much. Okay, I now entertain a motion at this time. Mr. Bullock?
Move to approve Resolution 2011-37.
Ms. Snyder?
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2011-37. Will the city attorney please read the title?
Title reads Resolution 2011-37, Resolution approving incentive agreement for UE Compression, LLC.
Okay, been a motion and a second. City attorney's read the title. Request a voice vote, please. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Resolution passes. Thank you very much. We will now move out of the regular agenda into study items. The first item up is review of the economy and city revenue estimates for 2012. Mr. Flannery, do you want to introduce Mr. Tinklenberg, or I imagine he's the one making the presentation?
You are correct, but I do want to kind of introduce the item.
Okay.
You know, a couple years ago, actually 3 years ago, while we were having our budget retreat, many of you may remember the stock market dropping by 800 points during that day. It's ironic that today we had a drop of over 600 points based on some of the, let's say, interesting events in D.C. that have occurred in the last few weeks. I think probably Mr. Tinklenberg is going to tell you this, but I certainly would as well. I think we are in a different place than we were then. There's a little scariness out there right now, but I think the economy is still building momentum and growing, and I think the situation is on the upward tick rather than where we were 3 years ago. There's been a lot of discussion among staff in the last month and a half, specifically on budget. I mentioned to you before that I'm very impressed and proud of the staff and how we've approached this. I think we've made sound, wise decisions in our expenditures. I don't think that we are making frivolous investments. I think those investments do improve the services and the safety of the community. So I don't believe that the purchase of the track was a negative. I would like to say that this is pretty much the kickoff of the budget season. And so we have a number of Monday night meetings scheduled for discussion. You will see staff coming before you from the different departments making presentations, and we will move forward with that and with the goal of having a retreat typically in September. And so I think we will let you know more about that as we go along. But Mr. Tinklenberg has a calendar of events that he's going to go through as well. So with that, I'd like to have Mr. Tinklenberg take over.
And just as an aside, and I know you're going to bring these dates up, I know at last week's meeting we had some discussion on the fifth Monday, not the fifth Monday, and I don't know that we made a decision on that. So if it could come across as a question rather than as a statement, it may be a little easier. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Tinklenberg, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. Here's the schedule that Mr. Flannery was referring to. Of course, tonight we're talking about the economy and the overview of the revenues, as well as reviewing the proposed capital improvement program projects. What is proposed for next week is that the city manager's recommendations regarding the department requests, and then also some of the departments will be presented. Then on August 22 would be additional department presentations, and then tentatively, the way it was set up anyway, was the plan was to have the August 29 meeting to wrap up the department presentations, wrap up the discussion on the capital improvement projects, and then obtain council's input regarding topics to be discussed at the budget session, which would happen in September. So if you want this changed, I would be happy to change this, just need your direction.
Mr. Mayor, before, one of the reasons that was assumed that the 29th, and we didn't want to just assume it, but I believe the ballot needs to be verified and certified on the 29th. So I think that happened a couple years ago for the same reasons. So I think that caused that, and I don't know, maybe I could defer to Mr. Gaylor on some of the specifics of that.
Okay, and that's fine. I just wanted it to come out as a discussion rather than, okay, Mr. Gaylor?
Yeah. Just to confirm what City Manager said, the ballot needs to be sent to the county for the coordinated election no later than September the 2nd. So August 29th being the last Monday that would be possible for approval, that's the date then that staff is planning to submit as part of the agenda for City Council's approval, the official ballot issues for us to send to the county on, or for the city clerk to send to the county on September the 2nd.
Okay. Just on this particular item, is there any discussion from council on just this particular item, the 29th? Okay. Then we're fine, and everything's okay. It makes it a little easier that way, and I apologize for putting that little extra wrinkle in, but that way it's all okay.
Thank you. Appreciate the guidance on that.
Well, Mr. Mayor, before you proceed, just for council's edification here, we do have scheduled on next meeting's agenda the action by the City Council to call a special meeting on August 29th for those purposes. So you'll be actually voting on it next week.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Then moving along, the retreat, if you will, the long session that's planned for basically 3 o'clock in the afternoon until whatever time we finish, is scheduled for September 12th. So that is the time when the discussion of the entire budget, as well as council's discussion of the legislative portion of the budget, would be held on the 12th, which is a Monday, but it would be scheduled for 3 o'clock in the afternoon as a start time. Then on October 17, the City Council and the GID Board of Directors will open public hearings and take any comments and then continue those hearings until October 24, and at which point both legislative bodies will close the hearings and act on those budgets. Again, that is subject to your direction, but that is currently what the calendar calls for.
Okay.
The reason for the change, normally that second meeting is in November, but given how the election falls this year, the election is actually the week before we would have that first council meeting. Therefore, we've moved this to the 24th. Again, the last part of the month is Halloween, and I believe there's a fifth Monday in there as well, so trying to avoid that was the reason for the 24th. Then moving along, looking at the national economy, as Mr. Flannery pointed out, we are going through interesting times, as some people call them. I think there's an element of panic that's happening in the market, but again, it takes a while to see how things do shake out in terms of the the rating agencies downrating the U.S. Credit rating, if you will. We are seeing slow growth now, and the economists are saying that that will continue. So it's just a long, sluggish slog to get out of the recession. Officially, we're out of the recession, but it's hard to tell that by the number of people who are still unemployed. One of the results is that both existing and new home sales are very slow. Durable goods orders fell again, but still the leading indicators are up. So Again, there's some optimism, but it's a tough situation. And employment is hardly budging. Retail sales, as a result, are mixed. Consumer confidence is low, but yet it rose in July. So again, very mixed signals. Right now, inflation is forecast to be 2.5% in 2012. We'll have to see what actually happens. So basically, the summary of all of that is job creation will be slow and consumer spending will grow as slowly. In terms of the regional economy, the forecast for Colorado in 2012 is for 1.5% growth. Here in Commerce City, residential home construction has dropped again this year. We've only seen 59 units in the first 6 months compared to 148 in 2010 during that first 6 months. Colorado jobs have been growing so far at 0.5%. So it's obviously going to take years to recover. Now, one of the things we've done with the city investment portfolio is that we've moved the money away from the money markets that have significant amounts of bank bonds, bonds from banks that hold a lot of European sovereign debt. European sovereign debt that I'm talking about is Greece is the most notorious, Ireland, Italy, Spain, Portugal, even now France. There's concerns about France's economy. So there's a lot of concern about the amount of sovereign debt being held by many of the banks, and we've moved our portfolio away from those money markets that hold that kind of investment. Hopefully it is something that we end up not having had to do, but at the same time we would rather be safe than sorry. Turning to the Commerce City economy, looking at the history here, we saw extremely rapid growth from 2001 to 2005, and then it dropped off in the period of 2006 to 2009. And as I mentioned earlier, it rebounded modestly in 2010, and now again the housing market has declined this year. Commercial and industrial sector grew 2001 through 2008. And now, again, 2010, 2011, we're seeing slight growth in the commercial and industrial sector, and that's good news. The upshot of all of that is our economy has weathered the recession better than many other area cities. Looking at the history of what has happened with our services and expenditures, there was an expansion in services from 2001 through 2008. That was reflected in the number of city employees. The number of employees basically tracked the growth in population. Then in 2009, population kept growing, but number of employees dropped off. Also in 2005, we took on debt and lease obligations, and use tax revenues from housing construction declined in the 2007 to 2009 period. We project the total revenues in 2011 to be slightly over budget and slightly more than the 2010 revenues. That's extremely good news. The estimate for 2012 revenues is to slightly exceed the 2011 budgeted revenues. So here's looking back. When we set the budget for 2011, we estimated revenues at $44.9 million. The budget was, expenditures were set at $45.2 million, and then some transfers, the largest being for debt service and also one for capital improvement programs, and that came from one-time dollars that were tax settlements in 2010. So the total that wasn't covered by revenue was a little over $6 million. Now, we filled that by closing out a special improvement district fund, which has basically expended everything that was necessary. The Parks and Recreation equipment reserve was used for about $85,000, and then we budgeted to transfer money from the fleet retained earnings and also to use fund balance in the general fund. The one-time dollars used for the capital improvement program were the $2.3 million, and you'll notice that matches the number above under the revenue side. So the end result of all of that is we balance the budget using some fund balances. So then,
Roger, let me interject here.
Sure.
Every year we go through this, and I think it always bears repeating, especially with a new member on council. Those fund balances, I think, were a very wise move from years past to actually have a programmable repair and replacement fund for fleet and IT, computer hardware, and those types of things. Most jurisdictions, probably in this region, do not have that luxury. Most jurisdictions in Arizona that I've worked for didn't have that luxury. What your city prior administrators did was they took sales tax revenue and earmarked it for these types of repairs and replacements and vehicles and IT and such. Good move. But in these hard times, that is sales tax that typically would go into a general fund. Because of the categories that were created, they were earmarked for certain things. We had the luxury of being able to tap into those. So we were not raiding any funds necessarily. These are sales tax revenues that we actually earmarked for those specific uses.
Quick question. Mr. Tinklenberg or Mr. Flannery, are you aware of any other cities that have a similar structure in the metro area where they reserve monies from sales tax for IT and fleet maintenance services?
I'm aware, I think there's only one city, I don't claim, total knowledge, but I believe there's one city that does it, I think it's for the information technology only. So it's not a common practice in the metro area. And just to follow up on what Mr. Flannery said, the allocation system that we use for those internal service funds is set up to cover not only their operating cost, in other words, their salaries and supplies and materials and that type of thing, but there's also a depreciation element that's involved. And so that depreciation element is what allows the replenishment of that fund balance. It's called retained earnings, and that is what is used then to buy replacement equipment in the future. So in that sense, it's self-funding, self-perpetuating, and it's like a little business, if you will, within the city for fleet, for information technology, and for facility services.
And what you'll see in the budget as we go along is that even when we take from it, we don't take it all. And so it replenishes itself in the next year. We've actually been lucky enough, because of our budget practices the last few years, where we've actually not had to go and tap into it. Because of the savings that departments have had at the end of the year, when you see that carryover ordinance coming to you, that's because the entire budgets weren't spent. So we didn't have to tap into those, even though we programmed them last year that we would tap into those funds, we didn't have to do that. So it's just more of a budgeting practice. I think it's good to have those things, but in the end, we didn't have to tap into them.
Thank you.
Then moving along, looking at our current revenues and expenditures, the second column there shows the adopted budget. Third column is the amendments to that budget, and then the fourth column shows the total amended budget. So the year-to-date transactions taken as a percentage of the amended budget results in the percentage received or used in the final column. So you notice that revenues budgeted at $44.9 million, and we've year-to-date received $25.2 million. That's, 56.2%. Then transfers, we have a significant amount budgeted at this point. Only $74,000 of that has been moved so far. That's 1%. Typically, transfers are done at the end of the year, and so we allow the revenues and expenditures to balance out, see if there is a gap before we actually do make those transfers. And that's what Mr. Flannery referred to earlier In 2010, we didn't have to do those transfers even though we had budgeted for them. The same thing was true in 2009. So the total then, if you look, total expenditures budgeted at $52.2 million, year-to-date $27.6 million, which is 53%. And then if you compare the revenues to the expenditures, you'll notice that we've spent $2.3 million more than revenues that we've taken in. Now, that's not a cause for alarm for the following reasons. One is a significant amount of that is due to the defeasance of the 2002 bonds. We did that near the beginning of the year, and that was done as an amendment to the budget. So that right there accounts for the $1.3 million. In addition, we have a number of things that are front-loaded, such as insurance premiums. Also, the lease payment on this building happens in the first 6 months, doesn't happen at the end. So those type of things are front-loaded, and that's why we're fine as we stand right now. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep monitoring, but the trend so far is good. In terms of projected revenues for 2011, the first 6 months look good. Right now, we're $320,000 ahead of the first 6 months in 2010. Now, I'll talk about that in a minute, but that's really good news, and I'll show you in a minute. The actual revenues, we believe, will exceed the $44.9 million budgeted for revenues. So business remittances have been strong. What has dropped off are the sales and use tax audit revenue, and I'll comment a little bit more about that in a minute as well. So the overall revenue is still higher, even with a large tax settlement in January to June. Now, there was one in the first 6 months, and then there were two in the last 6 months. So things will change and look different. These are the remittances for January through May. Now, you may ask, well, why don't we have June? June is remitted by the businesses in July, and the July numbers are now being basically divided up into the different pots of sales tax, use tax, auto use tax, building permit use tax, all of that type of thing. And I'll have that report in about a week and a half, so I don't have it at this point yet. Sales tax remittances, looking at the first 5 months of 2010 compared to 2011, you'll see that the remittances are up well over $1 million in sales tax. It's a 30% increase. Sales tax audits are down. You notice the difference there, almost $2 million versus $136,000. And again, we had a significant settlement in the first 6 months, and that's what made that $2 million number basically where it is. So it's down 94%. Use tax remittances are up, again, almost $1 million, 37%. Use tax audits are down almost $1 million, down 64%. Auto use tax is up by a couple $100,000, 26%. Building use tax is up. That's good news. But again, we had one significant building permit pulled at the beginning of the year that influenced that. Public improvement use tax up. The number's not significant, but it is 66%. Penalty is up slightly, and interest is down. The interest is due to low audit numbers. Again, that's where you see significant amount of interest coming in. So looking at the grand total, $14.9 million versus this year $15 million. So we're up 1% overall. So what I was talking about just earlier, there was one tax settlement in the first 6 months, and there were two in the last 6 months. Basically, in the first 6 months in 2010, the first one was about $2 million. Second one was, if I remember right, in the $3 million range, and then we had a very significant one at the end of the year. We don't anticipate any major settlements in 2011, so just want to forewarn everyone not to expect that there's going to be anything significant coming in the rest of this year. One-time revenue, we budget a minimal amount of the tax audit revenue as being recurring, and then the rest is classified as one-time revenue. So the recurring that portion of that one-time money is budgeted for operating expenditures. And the reason we do that is because that certain amount can be expected each year. It's just a certain amount that it is slowly growing over time, but that much we know we can expect each year. The excess of the budget, in terms of what's classified as one-time revenue, that needs to be used only on one-time projects and purchases. So then looking at the 2012 budget, and I have to caution everyone, the numbers that I'm going to share with you are still preliminary. Numbers are being still fine-tuned, and there's still some final decisions that are being made. So the numbers I'm giving you are very, very preliminary. The revenues were estimated using pretty much the medium estimate, and I'll show what we mean by that here in a minute. However, when we looked at the building permit revenue as well as plan check fees and that type of thing, and use tax coming in off of building permits, we used the ultra-low estimate of 130 residential units for 2012. The revenue estimate also follows council's direction given on June 13. In other words, I moved the vulnerable revenues out of the general fund that we discussed, and I included a refuse collection fee revenue to replace that revenue. And if that changes, then obviously we're going to have to make changes to the budget. Now, expenditure requests exceeded the revenues, but that happens every year. And it's just a matter of cutting that back and trying to make that all fit. There was a list of potential revenues that was shared with council on June 13. There were 24 that were basically tossed out as possible revenue sources. Council said to move ahead with red light camera intersections, so that's under evaluation. Medical marijuana, the ballot language is being prepared. Also, the Quality Community Initiative is underway, and that group is to study the sales tax increase question. Staff is working on the refuse collection fee and also on the stormwater utility fee. And I'll talk about that last one a little bit more later as well. So looking at the revenue estimates for taxes, we're showing $2.2 million in property tax. Of course, the large one there is the sales and use tax at $34.1 million. We show liquor and license permit revenue, and the big one always is building permits, and that is based on that ultra-low number of proposed units. Fines and forfeitures, the large number there, of course, is due to municipal court revenue that's brought in by police summonses, primarily traffic summonses, and then also we're showing photo red light. And then miscellaneous, the significant item there are the investment earnings. And again, based on current interest rates, that's what we're estimating for investment earnings. Charges for services, the most significant one there is the refuse collection fee. That is estimated to cover not only the refuse collection itself, but also the billing cost that was quoted to us by Waste Management when they submitted the bid for the service, I believe 2 years ago. Intergovernmental, that is the only vulnerable revenue left in the general fund. That's from the Adams County Road and Bridge tax, $430,000. That one was left there because we do not anticipate receiving stormwater utility fee revenue in 2012. Even if we impose it in even if we impose it for 2012, given the collection system that we're anticipating, we won't see the revenue until 2013. So that's why that one was left in the general fund, and in 2013, we can move road and bridge tax over to the capital improvement program and replace it with the stormwater utility fee. So the total revenue is $47.8 million, as discussed earlier. Now, looking at the assumptions that are behind those numbers, sales and use tax, we looked at a low, medium, and high range. Franchise tax, we did the same thing. So low is 3%, medium, middle range is 5%, and the high is 6%. And I'll show you where we ended up in a minute. Housing starts, we had the low, medium, and high, and we went back and developed an ultra-low based on what we've seen so far this year. All of the other revenue sources are evaluated based on the 2010 and what we've seen year-to-date in 2011. So here are the ranges. These are a little bit small, but I'll send the whole presentation out to you so you can look at it in your leisure. But I want to look at general property tax first to give you an idea. The low range there on property tax is 2.2 million, actually 2,252,000. The mid-range was 2,295,000, while the high range was 2,335,000. What we've actually used is 2,214,000. So you notice that one is lower than even the low range. And the reason for that is what has happened with property values. That affects the assessed values. Looking at sales and use tax, the low range there is 33.1 million, and the middle range was 33.8 million, high range 34.4 million. We went with 34.1 million. So you notice that's a little bit over the mid-range. So again, these numbers are based on what we've seen year-to-date and in 2010, and that's why they deviate from just mindlessly picking the mid-range, for an example. So the grand total of the general fund, low range we showed 46.9 million, mid-range 48 million. Our projected number for the 2012 budget, we're actually at 47.8 million, which is just slightly under the mid-range. So that gives you a sense of how these numbers ended up. Here are the preliminary expenditure requests. Administration, 4 million, human resources, 860,000, finance, 11.5, community development, 3.3, public safety, 13.4, public works, 5.2, refuse, 2.5 that we discussed, parks and recreation, 6.2. Transfers of 3,200,000, so subtotal of all of that is 50.5 million. Then in addition, there were new positions requested, new vehicles requested. Those vehicles would go with new positions primarily. Special consideration items. Special consideration item is any one-time item that does not result in a recurring budget appropriation. And then enhancements are ongoing increases to an operating budget. So all of that combined, the items that were selected so far for presentation to council total 621,000. Then we show 132,000 being transferred from the general fund to the capital improvement programs, and a subtotal of 754,000 for all of those new items, with a grand total of 51.3 million that was discussed earlier. Contained within the 51.3 million are those internal service funds that we talked about, that Mr. Flannery referred to: fleet management, facility services, and information technology. Their expenditures are covered by the allocations that are set up within the budget. Those allocations basically farm that cost out to each of the other operating departments. So looking at the current numbers for the 2012 budget as compared to the 2012 plan, when we adopted the 2011 budget, we also showed a 2012 plan, and that's what this column here, 2012 plan, refers to. If you look at the estimated operating revenues in the plan, we estimated 46.4 million. Right now, we're estimating 47.8 million, so it's an increase in the revenue. Operating budget, we had estimated 45.7 million. Right now, we're estimating 48 million. And then with the transfers, we had estimated that the gap not covered by revenue would be almost 3.6 million. And the way it stands right now, it's 3.45, so almost 3.5 million. How we currently are proposing to cover that is, again, we have an equipment reserve for parks equipment. Parks and Recreation equipment, and we propose using $77,000 of that. There's a fund balance within the general fund that is restricted to the Community Justice Fund, and that we propose using $84,500 of that, and then transferring $1 million from fleet retained earnings and $1 million from IT retained earnings, using fund balance of the general fund of $1,080,000, and then also using one-time revenue of $210,000, and that would cover the gap. But again, I caution you, these numbers are very preliminary, and they will change before we come back to you. So it's just to give you a quick snapshot of where we're at. So summary, revenues, expenditures, gap, and then how we're proposing to cover that gap. This is a look at the history. Prior to 2006, we were able to balance the budget by making cuts to requests. And then 2006, when looking at the 2007 budget, we started seeing a drop-off in revenue. And so after cuts, that gap was plugged basically with budget freezes, fund balances, and operating reserves. Again, in 2008, we used fund balances. And a note, in 2007, we actually didn't dip into the operating reserves. In 2009, we plugged the 2010 gap with $5.4 million from fund balances and also the internal service funds and the CIP. We actually didn't make those transfers from the internal service funds or the CIP, but budget-wise, that's how we plugged the gap. 2010, again, we plugged the 2011 gap with $6 million from fund balances in the general fund and fleet management, and we ended up not having to tap either one of those. So comparing 2012 to 2011, current gap $3.4 million, which we know we can cover, compared to last year when we set the 2011 budget, we were showing a $6 million gap, and we covered that. Now, the key difference is moving the vulnerable revenues out of the general fund to the CIP. What that did is it allowed us, or it enabled us to not have to move money from general fund to CIP because the projects in the CIP are being covered by those revenues going directly into the CIPP. And those primarily cover pavement management and concrete flat work as well as trails. And then the key difference is replacing that vulnerable revenue with the refuse collection fee. Here's a look at our historical revenues and expenditures, and also comparing where we're at in terms of budget for 2011 and the preliminary numbers for 2012. And you notice that revenues and expenditures have tracked each other fairly well until 2006. Revenues exceeded expenditures significantly that year, and then 2007, the expenditures caught up to revenues, and in 2006. It's hard to read at this angle. In 2007, the expenditures significantly exceeded the revenues. But again, that was due to a one-time expenditure. Then in 2008 and 2009, they've tracked very closely. 2010, revenues exceeded the expenditures. And then what we show budgeted for 2011 is that revenues will be under expenditures. However, right now, the way revenues are tracking, we anticipate that the revenues will actually exceed the expenditures. We'll see if that actually comes true by the end of the year. But budget-wise, it shows revenues being under expenditures. The way that we've, I guess the comfort level that we've had is not only do we have the retained earnings within those internal service funds, but we also have fund balance within the general fund, and that's both undesignated and designated. When I talk about designated, there's things like the loan from the general fund to the Gulf Enterprise Fund, for an example. So that's a designated amount, and it's not available for current use. In addition to the fund balances, we have operating reserves, which are set at 10% of expenditures. We have safeguard reserves, which are set at 10% of expenditures plus 50% of annual debt service. And then we also have the Tabor Reserve, which is required by the Colorado Constitution, which is set at 3% of expenditures. So our total reserves, aside from the fund balances, exceed 23%. And that's been the case for a number of years now. In terms of the dollars that are available, in 2011, what we have for fund balance in the general fund is $12.9 million. That's misleading, however. Of that $12.9 million, $7.9 million is in one-time money. In other words, that's what came from tax settlements, and that is what has been, in essence, set aside for one-time expenditures or to maintain a cushion. We do have the operating reserves at 4.5, which are basically last resort for operating deficiencies. We have safeguard reserves, which are only for emergencies. That's $6.5 million. And then the Tabor Reserve, which is $1.2 million, which are for emergencies as defined in the Colorado Constitution. In addition, we have some limited funds that are called contingency funds budgeted in both the general fund and the capital improvement program fund. Turning to the 2012 capital improvement program projects, the proposal is to use restricted pass-through and dedicated money for the capital projects. So that means Adams County transportation tax, which we anticipate receiving $600,000, solid waste tipping fee estimated to be $625,000, Adams County open space estimated to be $240,000, lottery money estimated to be $350,000, highway users tax $1.5 million. That's one of the vulnerable revenues we moved out of the general fund. Motor vehicle registration fees, $165,000. Again, that comes from the state and was identified as a vulnerable revenue. Cigarette tax, $100,000. Again, identified as a vulnerable revenue from the state and moved into the capital improvement program. Now, just a note about the highway users tax and the motor vehicle registration fees. The federal government has not basically renewed the transportation fuel tax, and if that doesn't happen, then I would anticipate the state legislature will look very closely at highway users tax and motor vehicle registration fees in order to balance their budget. So that's why those were classified as vulnerable, and I think we have to treat them as vulnerable revenue. In addition, we have impact fee funds. But the total of the dedicated revenues that I show there is just over $3.5 million, almost $3.6 million. So here are the proposed projects. 120th Avenue cost share, that's an agreement we have with Adams County. So in 2012, we owe them an additional $335,000, almost $336,000. We propose using transportation tax for that. There's also a DuPont cost share. Those are for the DuPont improvements. That's an agreement with Adams County, and we will owe them $171,000. We propose using highway user tax money for that. There's 104th Avenue Phase 3B. The total for that project is approximately $30 million. We're proposing to budget immediately $15.1 million, and that's the remaining general improvement district bond proceeds. So that would be budgeted, and then the remainder would be budgeted in subsequent years. Pavement management, $1 million. Again, highway user tax is proposed for that. Stormwater utility, it will cost approximately, or an estimated $200,000 to implement that, and that is proposed to come from the stormwater utility fees. The concrete flat work, $370,000. We're proposing to use motor vehicle registration money for that. Elm Drive paving, that's to pave a dirt road. That's $189,000. Proposing transportation tax. 71st Avenue paving, $46,500. Transportation tax. Police radios, $38,000. General fund. Technology infrastructure, $39,000. General fund. Soccer fields, $530,000. That's from the one-time money. Fairfax Park improvements, $385,000. That's open space money and lottery money. General park improvements, $50,000, proposed to be lottery money. Golf equipment replacement, lottery money, $25,500. Golf irrigation upgrade, $26,000, lottery money. Recreation center enhancement, $654,000. Open space, lottery, cigarette tax, general fund, and grants. So that one we've patched together a number of funding sources. Sand Creek Trail, $85,000. That would be open space and lottery. Tree replacement, $30,000, lottery funds. And then 104th Avenue multi-use path, $20,000. That would be park impact fee. So turning to some of the major policy questions, Council has been discussing these questions, and one of those is the medical marijuana tax ballot issue. Obviously, it's for discussion tonight, and then also Council action on the ballot issues August 22 and 29. Now, regarding the budget itself, we're not asking for any action or even discussion necessarily on the budget. That will certainly come at a future date if that's Council's wish to not discuss it tonight. We as staff are not asking for that discussion tonight. So here's some final thoughts on the budget. We remain fiscally sound. We have good fund balances and we have healthy reserves. But again, we're not out of the down economy. And as today's stock market has shown, things can change in a very quick hurry. And so obviously we need to keep current expenditures under control. And so far they are under control, but that's something that we have to continue to monitor. So we're not facing any immediate crisis as long as we control expenditures and generate more revenue. The budget gap could be a crisis if the city does not monitor and respond appropriately. And our goal is to present a balanced budget for council decision. Are there any questions?
Mr. Benson?
Yes, thank you. I'm still writing. Okay. This might not be in the order that you presented, Roger, but thank you for being here tonight to try to explain a lot of this complicated, these complicated financial matters to us. On one of your, one part of your PowerPoint, you had 2012 expenditures required for finance of $11.5 million. Exactly what is that?
I wish I could say it all went to salaries, but that would be self-serving, obviously.
No, I wouldn't want you to say that.
The major portion of that is for the internal service division, which is one of the 5 divisions within finance. Internal service division pays for all of the insurance premiums for the city, both property and casualty, as well as all of the personnel benefit type of insurance.
Do you have, I mean, without going into every item, do you have a page or something that you might be able to send to us? Maybe not tonight, but just send it by email so we can see what the breakdown is on that $11.5 million, because I don't want to take up everybody's time by having you go right down the list.
Sure, that'll be part of the city manager's recommendations at the next meeting.
Okay. But you'll be able to give us a breakdown of that?
Yes, sir.
I noticed under the request, I didn't see any requests for parks in the northern range. I've certainly made a lot of requests for that. I don't know. It said no request for that. I don't. Who's responsible for making requests?
Well, looking at the CIP projects, the current priority that we have understood from council is for trails in the northern range, and design work is underway now. And
there's 20,000 that I saw in there.
Yeah, that does not reflect what is the activity that's happening.
Okay. What is...
The 20,000 was just additional money that's needed at this point.
Can you give me a breakdown on what is planned to be spent on parks and trails in the North Range next year? Can you give me just a sheet that shows that?
Yeah, I don't have that available right now, but
all right.
Again, that can be something we can provide.
Okay, all right. And what is 104th Phase B? What exactly is that?
3B is the, well, let me back up. 3A is the project that just started at the intersection of Highway 85 and 104th Avenue.
Okay.
So 3B basically goes from the east end of 3A, so in other words, from the project at Highway 85 east to where the second phase ended, which is Nuclear Street or approximately the O'Brien Canal.
Right.
So it's widening that section in between
Good, okay.
those two.
All right. Yeah, Mr. Marino wants just to say a few words.
Quick question on that project, Roger.
Sure.
The 3B, that will, I imagine, include an expansion of the bridge that goes over I-76?
Yes, sir.
Great, thanks.
Ms. Carson?
Well, wait, I'm not through.
Okay, sir.
All right. I just partially yielded the floor to Mr. Marino at his request. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Soccer fields, $530,000.
Yes, that is by agreement.
What's done with that money?
If you recall, there was a commitment to the Cronky through the agreement, the master agreement that we have for this property.
Oh, that was that $5 million.
So there's $5 million, and what we did is we parlayed that into 10 years at $500,000, which included the suite.
I got you, because the key there was that we were supposed to give them $5 million, but there was nothing that said when, so we worked out an agreement to spread that out over. I would yield to Mr. Marino again for just a second. I do have one other item.
Sorry, I largely have the same questions as Councilman Benson. What is the expiration date on that agreement?
We've paid 3 years so far, so there's 7 more years.
7 more years? Thank you.
It was $5 million, right, okay. Okay, and lastly, the refuse collection. That's about, it costs us $2.5 million. Is that right? A year?
The refuse collection fee that we pay is almost $1.9 million. Then Waste Management proposed a collection fee administrative cost that brings that total to $2.5 million. Now, we're exploring other options, but as a worst-case scenario, we used their number. We think we can find other options that are more efficient, less costly, but as a worst case, we showed the total amount.
All right. And was there some mention about actually starting to charge people for that, as opposed to having it just include in the city services that we provide, to start charging each individual homeowner for that?
Yes, that was based on council direction on June 13.
So how much would that be per house if you broke that down on a monthly basis per house?
Well, that number will vary depending on what that administrative fee actually turns out to be.
Right.
But, if you take that existing amount by the 13,700 units, divide that by a monthly number, you're probably somewhere in that $14, $15 a month range.
Right.
Currently, in my home, I pay $22 a month. So it still would be a significant savings to the citizens.
You bet it would. Thank you. And I guess since that is a fee, that would not require a Tabor vote. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank God. Ms. Carson?
I also had the soccer fields question. Can you tell me with your answer, though, why it says one time?
We're proposing to set aside a portion of the one-time money to cover that remaining 7 years.
Okay.
Let me jump in there.
Yeah.
When we there was money set aside in 2006 to cover that commitment. In 2007, the bottom fell out of the budget in the nation, really. So we used some of that one-time money that was earmarked for those fields as a one-time chunk. We actually parceled that out and covered parts of the gap that were in the budget. And what we did is we also took a chunk of it and covered a couple of years of payments in that knowing that, well, we were hoping that the budget would recover, and as each year went by, we did look at other revenue sources to put towards it. That is a specific cost that is committed for 10 years, 7 more years left on it, and we think we have it covered through the budget process. But we have the luxury of having some one-time monies that we can actually still put towards it.
Okay, thank you. And then, Roger, can you go back a couple slides? I don't know which one it was, but it showed the operating budget. It showed what it is now and what the projected is.
Was it this one?
No. Oh, I think it's this one. Yeah. Can you explain to me that $3,000 difference there from, it says 2012, 45, and then 2012 at 48. So it's a $2-some million difference there, the first line in red?
Oh, I
No,
see. The
wait a minute.
operating budget?
Yes.
Yeah. When the plan was put together, I'm trying to remember some of the assumptions that were made. I know that the one-time, or the enhancements that were made in the 2011 budget translate into the 2012 budget, and then wage increases also, roll into that following year. So I think that accounts for the difference. I would have to defer to, let me look at it a little bit more and confer with Jason, our budget analyst, and be able to get back to you.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
Mr. Marino?
Roger, a few questions. You mentioned that the lease payment for the Civic Center is paid in the first half of the year. Do you have an amount for that, of what we pay for that lease payment?
Yeah, it's about 1.4 million, almost 1.5 million.
And is that yearly?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. If you could flip back to the expenditure request slide. Actually, I think Mr. Benson asked the question that I was planning to ask on this slide. The CIPP projects slide. A couple of these are somewhat general. Can you explain, for example, what the rec center enhancement will include?
Do you know if you have? I can't off the top of my head, and I forgot to bring my capital improvement list with me, so I'm going to ask if Mr. McBroom can answer that.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Although I don't have my notes in front of me, there are a number of related renovations occurring within the Recreation Center. It includes some renovation to some office space, renovations to the Senior Center area, and renovations to the youth areas of the Recreation Center.
Great. And the Mr. Benson asked the question that I was going to ask in terms of so the refuge collection fee being designated as a fee will not then require a vote of the citizens?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and council members, one of the things that we can do, and as we're getting the questions, we'll make note of them, and as each department comes to you and makes the presentation, we'll make sure that they address the question that you've asked.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Bullock?
Yes, for the acquisition of the homes on Veterans Park, do we have a dedicated fund?
We have a capital improvement project that has some money set aside for that, yes?
Okay, so as they become available, okay, thank you.
Mr. Benson?
Yes, thank you. I just had one further question. Jerry, maybe you could answer this. That was a $5 million obligation that was entered into maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Can you go into the origin of that? Because I think there are a lot of people that don't understand why we agreed to pay Cronky $5 million.
Sorry to chuckle.
I think you worked it out in an exemplary manner. We just got to pay it off $500,000 a year. But why was this ever agreed to in the first place, if you can explain that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councilman Benson. It was predated me, but one of the first things that I inquired of staff when I got here was where that information was in black and white, because I had heard about it. I'd heard that it had come up in a budget retreat, maybe up north somewhere at the very end of the meeting, where the commitment was made and it was put in the budget. I found it in the master agreement in black and white. And you're right. You remember very well. There wasn't a time frame of how to pay that back, and so we settled on a 10-year time frame, and that's what you see up there now.
Does anybody recall why we agreed to this? Agreed to pay Cronky another $5 million?
Mr. Mayor, I can weigh in a little bit. Okay. Part of the justification, as I recall, was that these fields were to provide the opportunity for the community to play soccer, and so the commitment as it was presented at that time was that this would be the city or the city's share of having that amenity available to the community. I think the merits of that can be debated back and forth for many hours, but if you compare it to building soccer fields and paying maintenance on soccer fields, then, to have 24 fields available to the community would have cost far more than that. In fact, these cost far more than that. So the justification was that the city's share would be basically 6 of the fields. That was deemed as being the city's share,
and so
rightly or wrongly.
But as I understand it, and I might not be correct on this, when some of our youth soccer leagues or other people use those fields, they have to pay for using them, don't they?
That is correct. And again, that is...
we've already paid for them. They have to pay again.
Well, there's 2 costs always. Okay. One is the capital cost, and the other is the ongoing maintenance and operation cost. Right. And so that's what they're paying for, is that ongoing operation and maintenance cost. And that's why when the city programs those fields, we pay a fee as well, and it's for that ongoing operation and maintenance cost, which is aside from the capital cost originally.
Well, I guess the so-called bottom line is it is a legal obligation of ours, and I think Mr. Flannery worked it out in a pretty good manner so that we could pay it off, $500,000 a year. So we're stuck with it for the next 7 years, I guess. So.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Marino?
Well, Mr. Tinkenberg, like you said, the merits of the actual expenditure can be debated. My frustration is that I think largely our community does not use those fields. For, I think, most of the citizens in this area, those fields are largely inaccessible to them. I see people using the fields, yes, and they are from out of town. And we are paying Cronky Sports Enterprises for these fields for other citizens outside our city to use them. I completely understand the obligation that we have. We agreed to it back then. Just my frustration. And, I might as well just go off the deep end because I'm already here. I would like to see, and I will be bringing this up at the retreat, for us to delete the elected officials' retirement fund. We already pay into Social Security on our stipend that we receive on council, and I perceive it as a double dip. that we're getting 2 retirement benefits out of one service, out of one job we perform. So I will be bringing that up at the budget retreat, but that is one item that I would like to see not be continued to be funded.
Okay. And
Told you I was going off the deep end.
I know, but just to relate, that is only one council person's opinion.
We understand, Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
and certainly the rest of you can give us that direction as well. One of the things I wanted to mention on the soccer fields specifically, I know that the time frame over 10 years is discussed quite a bit, and the fact that there is a suite in that number for economic development purposes. But one of the things that we also negotiated was discounted rates for residents. Now, discounted from here, it still may be, I don't know what those numbers are. Maybe we can come back to you next week when Parks and Rec presents to you. We did negotiate a discounted rate, but I don't think it's necessarily within the reach of some of the organizations within the city.
Ms. Carson?
Can we clarify, for my benefit and everybody else's, when we're talking about the trash collection, are we saying that we're supporting the idea of stopping that, or is that just something we're looking at?
I think, and Councilwoman Carson, I think what staff, we received direction to move that direction on the 13th of June, and that's what we've included in this, the assumptions in this budget. So the assumptions are that there will be a charge for it, that it's not going to go away, but that residents will, anybody who's a customer who receives trash collection will be paying for that service on a monthly basis. And so the number that Mr. Tinklenberg assumed as the highest number most likely will be lower, but we had to assume the largest number, 2.5 million, as the cost of that going forward. Most likely we'll probably negotiate a lot lower number than that, and so we're hopeful that it's a lot lower than that.
Okay, maybe it was just my perspective. I knew it was discussed. I didn't know that we as a council had decided 100% we were going that direction.
I would just say that if the direction is to not go that route, then we need to go back as a team and identify the costs of the gap that would be created by that being removed. It's not undoable, but it's something that we would have to go back and resharpen pencils.
And it just might be mine that I missed that. Then back on that, I don't know which slide it was that it showed new positions, vehicle replacements or something, all in one. This one. Can you explain to me what new positions have been put into that?
Yes, there are 2 technicians proposed for the Public Works Department, and the reason for that is we have a maintenance agreement between Commerce City and Adams County, whereby Adams County maintained a number of roads basically within the boundaries of Commerce City, and Commerce City in exchange maintained some roads that are Adams County's roads with, that also fall within our jurisdiction. So it was an exchange of service, but as we've annexed more and more property, it's become more and more one-sided, and Adams County says at this point, okay, enough is enough, you need to take over more of your streets. So per that maintenance agreement, we are obligated to take on additional streets that we have annexed, and as a result, we're going to have to add 2 more staff members as well as a couple vehicles to be able to do that.
To help Mr. Marino out, I will jump in that jumping off point. I also would like to see the councilman retirement fund totally gone away. I don't think it's sustainable. I can't predict how long somebody's going to live, so how much money do I know to put in there for someone? And so I don't know. I also don't know, and some will debate this, whether this is a part-time job up here or not, these type of benefits coming with a part-time position. I know that there was good intentions by council when they put this in, but I really agree that it probably needs to go away.
Again, that's two people. It's not a council direction at this point. Mr. Bullock.
Well, I'm going to definitely be on the other side of that one, and I can give you 25 reasons why, and why it was put into effect, and it's $20 a month for the time that you serve. It doesn't come to anything. With the time I've served, I would get $200 a month, and and I think the longest serving council person and mayor in the city of Commerce City is Dave Busby, and I think his comes to something like $560 a month for all the time they serve. Now, this is what we consider a part-time position that we do full-time, because anytime anybody calls you, you're working. And I have had calls from 11, 12, and I used to have a gentleman that used to call me up around 1 o'clock in the morning until I got on the 4 o'clock shift and would call him back before I went to work and give him an answer. And then he decided that me waking him up wasn't as much fun as him waking me up, so we quit that. But I will definitely debate that, and if I'm on the losing end, I will be grateful. But I hope I'm not. And if I am, I'm going to ask for all the money I put in, give them to me now so you can have it. Okay. But other than that, now on the soccer fields, that $500,000 that we put in for 10 years, at the end of that 10 years, that comes to a certain amount, and what do we get for it? Basically, we don't own 6 soccer fields that we've paid for.
That's correct.
So, I mean, I know that if I was Stan Kroenke, I wouldn't be open to renegotiate anything because I stand on the best end of this deal. But it, at the time that it came about, it was a good idea. It was good at the time because it seemed like our residents were going to have really good access to those fields for programs that were run through the city. But it has never come out to that way, that our residents to play soccer, most of our residential soccer teams that are in the city play at all the different elementary schools or junior highs or stuff, because getting access to those fields is expensive and there doesn't seem to be the access that it was supposed to be. The tournaments during the summer take all the fields, and so and on weekend tournaments, we cannot access any of those fields, even though we are paying for it.
And just as an aside, if this is where we're headed now, because I don't know, I've got all these people signed up after you've started this, not everybody on council can get Social Security. Okay, so don't use the swap as one of your reasons, because I can't get any Social Security. Mr. Benson.
Yes, thank you, sir. On the soccer field issue, we don't lose our rights to those fields once this debt is paid off, do we? It continues on in perpetuity? Okay, that's a good word. I like that word. With regard to the city council, retired city councilman issue, how old are you, Mr. Marino?
I don't see what bearing that has on this conversation, but I am 26 years old.
You're going to become eligible for Social Security in about 50 years, and there won't be any such thing as Social Security by that time. So it's not going to be in existence for much longer, about the next 15 or 20 years, I think, the way from what I hear. But and it would only, if this council voted to stop that, it would only have prospective application. It wouldn't have retrospective application. Is that correct, Mr. Gaylor?
How does he know that?
Right. It's not going to stop, like for Mr. Busby, his payments wouldn't stop if we changed that. But
I'd have to look into that. Under the charter, you cannot increase for existing council members during your term of office, except for when new members come on the city council. Now, for a decrease, our charter does not address a decrease, and my offhand opinion is that this is not a vested right. So therefore, I think that you could terminate prospectively. Obviously, anything that's already been paid has been paid, and that's a completed contract, and there's no refund involved. But I think prospectively, it could happen if a majority of the city council decided to adopt such an ordinance.
But if there was an ordinance dealing with that issue, the ordinance could state that this will have only prospective application. We could do that.
You could do that with your
Okay.
with your ordinance, right?
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Marino?
Obviously, this is something that we can discuss more in depth at the budget retreat, so I'll keep my comments brief. It's not a practice that I see employed by any other metro area city. We do get a stipend, and, yes, some of us can't collect Social Security, but a lot of us can. And it is, in my view, double dipping in that sense. So you know which side I'm on, and I will continue to advocate for it. Thank you.
Ms. Snyder?
First of all, on the soccer field issue, I too agree with Councilman Bullock. When we went into the agreement, we were sold the package that basically we would have our youth, our children, our community would have the opportunity to use the fields, that they would basically have first right to use the fields. As I recall, that's the way it was given to us. And the way, I'm sure Councilman Bullock remembers as well, is the way it came to us was at the end of 2 very long days of being in the retreat. And at the last minute, we were visited and discussed with this situation, and we were told that it would be our community and that our kids would have first right to the fields, and it was really sold to us, in that way. So we felt like it would benefit our children and our community for us to do this. I'm very disappointed that it didn't turn out that way, and unfortunately, what we were promised is not what we got. So that's the way that went, unfortunately. The second thing is I have really got to say that this discussion about the retirement, I think that there are many people that have served this community, for many long years that have been great leaders that have, this is something that was a part of their, their benefit package. They knew that this was coming, and if we decide to go forward with not funding it anymore, then it would affect those people. I mean, I understand that they wouldn't have to give the money back that they'd received, but I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of upset officials from the past that will come forward and be very unhappy about not funding that in the future. So I'm going to have to say that, I'm going to be going along with Councilman Bullock on this one. I think that we need to have a discussion about this, a long discussion, to figure out what this would mean, what the implications would be, and I just don't think that it's fair to the people that have served. So that's where I'm at with that. Thanks.
I'm about ready to say there's no one else here, but I know there'll be somebody that have to light up. Mr. Flannery.
Mr. Mayor, it's not my goal to start another round, but we made a concerted effort to stretch budget meetings out over a month's time, so we didn't run into a situation where something was coming up at the last minute. So that's why we dedicate August Monday night to budget, and then culminate that in a retreat in September. With that in mind, a more concerning topic, and I know both of those are important, but a more concerning topic that raised itself tonight in my mind that I would not like to get to September 12th and have come up again unless it's clear, is that we have one council member who's not sure the direction was given to do refuse collection. If there are others of you in that same boat, we'd like to know now, because we will be scrambling to come up with the revenue in the budget to cover that gap that would be created by taking that away. Now, if the expectation is that we want to move that direction, then it's part of the assumptions in this budget that's been presented. If it's not, then we've created approximately a $2.5 million gap that we need to figure out to address. And we can do that, but the earlier we know the consensus of the council, the better.
Okay. And you know it's all lit up, right? Okay. Ms. Carson.
I apologize. I just wasn't clear when we I thought it was, in my mind, it was something we said for future discussions. But on this page here, on community development, can you enhance on that? What is that $3 million for?
Community development is the community development department, so that's the planning division, the building safety division, and neighborhood services.
And is that salaries? What is that in there?
That's the total operating budget for that department. And for community development, a significant part would be salaries, yes, because they don't have projects that they do, it's mainly staff work.
Okay, thank you. And not to keep beating something up, the retirement fund. The city employs part-time employees, and I don't think any of them get a retirement fund. Social Security is only collected by those who pay into Social Security. So if the mayor did not pay into Social Security, no, he cannot collect it.
Mayor paid in, he just doesn't get out because he makes too much in retirement.
Mr. Mayor, they will only reduce that by, $534 a month is what the windfall says.
That number is not at all correct, and I sat with Social Security.
Okay, but that has nothing to do with it. It has to do with what's right and what's fair. I don't believe it's fair for part-time employees to set up at this dais and receive that when part-time employees who work hard for this city, and they invest just as much time into this city as what we do. They have a commitment to this city. They would probably like a full-time job that we're not giving them. I was told when I first came on here, as Mr. Marino was, we have part-time employees who come back year after year after year after year, and they've been coming back for a long time. So when you give yourself something, you have to make sure it's fair. And the other thing is I just don't see that as sustainable. I truly don't. And Mr. Marino is correct, because it was something that I think caught both of our eyes when we first got put on here. Every council member from another city that I have ever had any conversation with, I have asked this question of, I've not found one yet who receives this. So I don't mind being unique in certain ways that I can walk around proud of, but I'm sorry, this isn't one of them. So,
Mr. Marino?
This is the last thing I'll say on that topic. My intention is not in any way to disrespect the service of previously elected officials in Commerce City, which is why I would be open to making it a prospective ordinance rather than retroactive. My reasoning is simply that this is not a common occurrence among other cities. Yes, we work hard. I have recognized that since I've been elected. I know the hours that we put in here. But that does not mean that we are entitled to these special benefits that no other city pays out to its elected officials. That's all I'll say about that. And on Mr. Flannery's item, I did believe that the council did give direction in terms of the refuge collection fee. We had a good discussion about it. We indicated that we were both interested in a refuge collection fee and a stormwater utility fee. And staff then went and made projections based on that direction from council. When I talked to the average citizen, and I don't know if we polled this in our community survey that we did, but when I talk to the average citizen, what they want to see is parks, trails, open space, recreation, safe streets, a well-funded public safety department. And right now, that refuge collection fee is eating up more than $2 million of our general fund budget. That's a lot of money that could be going to other programs, could be developing new programs for our citizens to enjoy, giving them other services. I don't believe that when that poll went out, in terms of why people locate here, I don't think free trash would rate highly on that poll. So I want to see us use that money to do new projects, to offer our citizens new services, and to maintain the ones that they already have.
Ms. Snyder?
Sorry, City Manager Flannery and Roger. I did not understand that we came to a firm conclusion that we were going to stop the trash collection. I do recall we had a conversation about it, but I'm sorry, I'm just speaking for myself personally. I did not recall actually coming to the conclusion that we would cease trash collection, free trash collection. So I'm going to have to be one of those people that says, I'm sorry, I did not realize we were saying that was a firm thing, so.
Mr. Bullock?
I do remember the conversation, and I do remember the discussions on both the stormwater and the trash. And one of the things that we ended up saying, that we knew that it was going to come to an end one day, free trash collection in Commerce City. And it was one of the things on our list of items that we did send forward. And I sent it forward with a lot of regret, because that's one of the things that we had promised the citizens for a long time. But it seems like our citizens have outgrown our budget. And if it's not this year, it's going to be next year, or I think it's one of the bite the bullet items that we really should be looking at now, because when you look at $2.5 million out of trash collection, and yet we speak to each other about what we like to do in the city and where we're going to get the money for this and that, and we're still offering free trash collection. Denver says they offer free trash collection, but it's tied into your sewer bill and your water bill. So a lot of people don't even realize that they're paying for it. At the rate that we're asking people to pay, it's a fraction of most other cities. And what I think we should do, if people still have doubts about it, is see how much the cities that mirror us, Brighton, North Glen, Westminster, and all of them, and see what they're paying for trash collection and price it accordingly. But we did do it. And we did send it forward to staff with a recommendation. That was one of the things we were going to use for revenue. I'm not going to beat that dead horse. I had thought about it very seriously, but I'm going to let that horse die until the conversation comes. And I'll tell you what United Airlines did to me after a promise of 37 years. And then it might bring it into perspective that just because, we'll leave it at just because, you know.
Mr. Diaz?
You guys can remember June 13th was the day that I was appointed.
Right.
So as you can imagine, everything is kind of blurry. Even looking back at it, I just remember that day being hazy. However, what I do remember at that time was I do remember us holding that discussion. I do remember us listing that as a priority. What I don't recall, though, well, being the new person, I really wasn't sure what exactly constitutes council direction. But I do remember us listing that as a priority. However, that being said, That doesn't mean I'm not open to it, just because any new source of revenue I think would be worth a discussion in terms of helping out the community. But I do remember the discussion, but please forgive me because that night was blurry.
Mr. Marino?
I have no doubt that a refuge collection fee will take a lot of political fortitude from this council. But we look at the situation that we're in now, and Councilman Diaz and I took a tour of Waste Management a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about this pay-as-you-throw concept. So this doesn't necessarily have to be just a fee that comes from this council, but also an agreement with our community that we will incentivize things that this council has long made a priority, like recycling, of being environmental stewards of our community. There's this option that you pay as you throw, so the more trash that you have versus recycling, the higher your bill will be. I think that there's an implicit incentive in there to get people to recycle and to really get educated about becoming environmentally friendly and having a sustainable approach to the way that they dispose of their trash. So just want to put that in there, that I think that's one of the initiatives that we should look into when we're considering this refuge collection fee.
Ms. Snyder?
Yeah, and I totally understand where you guys are coming from on this, Councilman Bullock, Councilman Moreno. I do understand where you guys are coming from, that we could use the revenue, and that, eventually, there will come a time that, that it probably will happen. But I guess my concern is that, it might not seem like a lot of money, $15 or $22 or whatever it is a month, but right now people are really struggling. And, $22 might be 2 meals to a family. It might be, it might make a significant difference right now when people are really suffering. We're in the worst economy I personally have ever seen as long as I've been around. So, it might not seem like a lot of money, but I know to the people that I represent, it's a lot of money. It could be a lot of money. So I just really think we need to think long and hard about this before we go forward with this.
Ms. Carson?
I'm not trying to be difficult, but I do remember talking about this and seriously and saying, but I guess I was under the belief that we were looking at this and we were going to figure out how it would look like, because if it means we're not doing trash pickup anymore, does that mean that everybody goes out and hires their own trash service? Because now we're putting how many trucks on the road? If it means that the city's going to still do this and we're going to charge you, I don't even know how we're going to collect that fee. That's why I'm saying that I felt like it was a direction council was saying we need to look at, but I didn't think that we were ever had ever really understood exactly how this would look, and that council then was supporting, yes, let's go forward with that whole look. I do think we were very serious about looking at it, but just to see it right here and right now, I may have made some different comments if I would have thought this is where it was going to show up, because when you take something away from citizens, I think they want to know what you're going to do with that money. And when I say, well, we're just going to put it back into the general fund, I don't think anybody's going to be very happy. I don't think people move here for the free trash service. But I will tell you, I hear it touted all the time in my neighborhood, and not to sound mean or nasty, but when they're complaining, then they always back it up with, but I get free trash service. And that, coming from somebody coming out of sight of a county where we were paying our own, I think people see it much higher than the $22 or the $15. So I think if we did something like that, everybody would be much happier at the thought of that we were still supplying it, but it was a very reasonable rate. It wasn't going to be this exorbitant fee that you all pay when you all go out and hire your own service, and you have a trash truck down the street every day then, because everybody then has hired a different service. And I like the looks of this, that we all put out on the same day in this neighborhood, and it's all cleaned up on that day, and no more worries about it. Our HOAs, I imagine, would have a terrible nightmare trying to figure out whether your trash cans are supposed to be out today and whether they were supposed to be put back tomorrow, because what service would they know we were using? So that's all I'm saying is I do know this council had said they wanted to take an in-depth, what I thought, study, I didn't know we were there yet.
Mr. Mayor, maybe I can clarify some things here, if you're willing.
Please.
On June 13, when we had the discussion, if you recall, we had the keypad polling. And so the keypad polling talked about should we move the vulnerable revenues. And as I recall, the keypad polling, there were 7 in favor of that and 2 said no. Then when it came time to discuss replacing that vulnerable revenue, the keypad polling was unanimous, 9 to have these fees. Now, you're absolutely right, Councilmember Carson, that we don't know the exact configuration of how that will look, because certainly one option might be that the city would get out of that business completely, and so we would not have the expenditure, we would not have the revenue. The difficulty with that is what you pointed out, and that is, every individual homeowner or household has to go find their own trash collection service, and it could be any day of the week. And so you might have 5 trash trucks traveling the same street in a week, for example. And that happens in my neighborhood in Westminster. There's trash out at least 3 days of the 5 every week, and there's multiple trash trucks going up and down the street. So number one, it's very inefficient. Number two, it causes significant amount of wear and tear on the streets because those trucks are heavy. They're not, they're not a residential sized vehicle. So at the one extreme, you have that option of getting out of the business completely. What we're proposing is that the city would continue to be the agent, if you will, for all of the residential properties within the city. And how that looks is what's still being considered and worked on. Because at one, at one end you could have pay as you throw, as Mr. Marino pointed out. At the other end, you could just have a flat rate that applies to everybody no matter what they put out. Another option that we've been discussing is that there's about 14% of our households that are below the poverty line, and maybe it makes sense that it be an income qualified service in the sense that those that are below the poverty line could submit their information and not be billed. Now, how do we cover that? Well, one option is to cover it in everyone else's bills, or the city covers it. Again, there's multiple ways to approach this, just as there are multiple ways to bill for the service. One is to use the trash collection company themselves to bill for it, and that's what we've incorporated in the budget based on their last bid. Another method would be to contract with someone else. Another method would be for the city to set up its own billing service. Another method would be to basically assess those fees and put it on with the property tax. So there's multiple approaches, and all of those are being reviewed right now, and that's why staff is studying it, because there are going to be multiple ways to handle this, and those will be presented to council for your review and consideration and discussion. And the intent is to bring all of that information to you before the end of this year so that action can be taken to basically proceed with the budget as we have structured it. But as Mr. Flannery has pointed out, if that is not the council's intention to go that direction, then we need to change direction on the budget itself.
This was probably one of the hardest parts of that meeting for me because of this. But I keep looking at, we bring in $2.2 million in property tax from all the residences in our city. And we pay out 2.6 just to pick up the trash. We've got to come up with something. I mean, there's got to be a better way to do this. I'm not sure what it is. But, just financially, I mean, it doesn't even make sense. That's before you put the first policeman, before you fill the first pothole, before you send out the first of whatever. I'd love us to be able to keep free trash. I think it improves our city because people don't store it up in their backyards or in their driveways or in their carports. If there's any way at all that we can somehow survive this, I think it would be great. But, I just keep looking at we're $400,000 more we pay out than we bring in. What business out there can afford to do that? It's something we're going to have to look at. I hate it. I do. And I told you that on the 16th. I absolutely hate that we would have to find it. And I'm with Ms. Carson, unbelievably, on at least one thing. I don't want to see 5 trash trucks in my neighborhood. They tear up the roads. It's going to cost us more than this $2 million just to keep up the roads if we don't take care of it. So we've got to come with a way that says if we're going to bill them, we've got to make sure everybody has the same trash company, that everybody's picking up on the same days. We can't afford to just dump it completely and say, hey, you're all on your own, because we're going to have to hire way more community guys to go out and hit those yards again. And boy, I don't want to go there. Mr. Flannery.
Our goal would be to maintain one contract for the city.
Yes.
Because none of us agree that having 10 companies come in would be beneficial.
Yes. Terrific. And I think that's where you want to be looking. So, and this will come up again, right? Yeah, we just want to go down the line. Mr. Bullock?
What are we consenting?
Well, just, do you want to leave this $2 million charge in there, or do we want to have them look at some other way to make up $2.2 million, or $2.5 million?
Wow, I want to do both.
Okay. Here's your answer.
I would love to leave that $2.5 million in there, but I don't want to put the burden on you to try and find $2.5 million worth of...
Okay, you got it. I think that's probably, I just got something from Mayor Pro Tem. Maybe the question is, do we want to keep free trash at this point? Yes or no? Mr. Bullock? Do you want to not be first? Let's go to Mr.
Because that's another one. Yes, I would love to keep free trash, but
Okay.
no, we can't anymore. So what I'm saying is, in my heart, that is something that we promised, and I would love to do it. It has become economically unavailable right now to do that.
Yeah.
So your answer is yes, take it away.
What?
Is that how we're setting this up?
Yeah, let's see. Mr. Diaz.
That is a loaded question, by the way.
It is. I know it is. That's why they're paying you the big bucks.
Ideally, yes, I would love to keep the free trash. However, that is a pretty wide gap, and I do think we need to explore other options. That answers that question.
Mr. Marino.
I think the mayor put it very well. We bring in less in property tax than we pay out in trash service. It's unsustainable. So yes, I am for looking at options to impose a refuge collection fee.
Mr. Benson.
I pretty much agree with everything that everybody said, that we can't afford to do it anymore. And I guess I'd like to see if we don't have to use that money to actually pay for the trash service. I'd like to see it's going to be new money coming into this city. And I'd like to see it designated for things like parks and trails in the Northern Range.
Okay.
So we can get some things done.
Do we have a yes or a no? Do we cut it? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Carson.
I'm going to say no. I agree that we should cut it. I agree we need to start charging for some of it. I'm going to say no because I still need more information before I can say yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to say yes if we don't say what we're doing with the money, not just that it's going back in there. As Mr. Benson said, if we can say to citizens, and Mayor, I would like for you to please repeat what it is we bring in taxes.
We bring in $2.2 million in property tax, and we spend $2.5 million to pick up the trash.
Okay.
It's a big hunk.
That's right. And so this needs to happen. I am just not comfortable with that. I don't feel I know that much yet that I can go out there and explain to people what we're going to do with the money, what the price is going to be, whether we're going to have families who can submit for that. These are just things that have been put out there. I would like to have a true plan.
Mr. Mayor, and I, just to weigh in, the beauty about our format is that this was the introduction of the issue. So, one of the last things on the last slide was there's no decision or even discussion necessary tonight. I'm glad we're having it, really glad we're having it. I'm glad we're coming up with some general consensus of what we want to do. But that department, Public Works, will be coming to you in a future Monday night meeting, and you will have another discussion. And with this discussion, we can go back and work with Public Works to actually refine their presentation for when that comes up.
Ms. Snyder?
No.
Okay. Do you have something to add, Mr. Flannery, or not? No?
To answer Councilmember Carson's, the money that we moved out of the general fund to the CIP fund basically allows us to fund these type of projects, the pavement management, concrete flat work, and trails. So that's...
It allows you to fund them for this period, right? But it is not money that has been designated that that's where it will always go?
It would be, it's always designated for the general, or I'm sorry, for the capital improvement program. So...
Right, but not what we know what's going to happen in that.
Well, again, we could restrict it with council direction or leave it general like this. The only advantage of keeping it general is that if there were an economic downturn in the future, then that revenue could be shifted back over to the general fund temporarily to fill a gap. But again, whatever council direction is how we can handle it.
And I would recommend against restricting funds like that, only because it allows you the flexibility as issues come up. So let's say we want to throw more towards parks and trails, and that's the consensus, then allows you to do that without having to restart everything over.
Okay. Whoa. Who thought that one was going to be there?
I think we have a general consensus, although it's less stable than we heard on June 13th and represented to you on June 27th.
Yeah, I think what it's going to take is just to say this is what would take place if you don't do it.
Right.
So, good? Okay.
What did we finally bring up as a consensus?
The consensus is that it's going to be left as it is now, but that we'll probably look at it as it comes up. More information as it comes up. When that department brings theirs forward, that will be a major part of what they're saying. Okay, next item, which should be just as much fun as the last one. Review and discussion of proposed ballot questions. Mr. Flannery.
I'll take this
one.
one.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gaylor.
Okay. Well, as I indicated previously, the council needs to adopt an ordinance that sets these ballot issues for the election. And we have 3 ballot issues that you have previously directed us to prepare, and you have before you tonight for discussion. The first ballot issue has to do with the taxation of medical marijuana facilities and related facilities. And as you'll note in the ballot question as I have it drafted, it's on page 65 of my packet, it leaves blank the percentage of the tax that is to be imposed. And note it says additional tax because we already have a sales tax of 3.5% that would be in effect regardless of this ballot issue. So the question that needs to be answered by the council as far as direction to me is concerned is what percent of excise tax do you want to have inserted in that ballot issue. And before I leave that one, the second question you need to decide is, do you want to earmark the revenues from this particular tax? And this would only be for the excess tax that we're talking about, because the sales tax goes into the sales and use tax fund, part of the general fund. So that we're not talking about. We're talking about the additional tax. If you want to earmark that, or if you want it part of just your general revenues, that's one issue. The second issue is the percentage of tax that you'd want, in addition to the 3.5%. So I would like, as a suggestion, if we could take up each ballot issue separately as we go. So let's get that one resolved, and then I'll move on to discuss ballot question 2 and 3.
Okay, Mr. Benson.
Yes, thank you. I know we had a discussion before, and I think I raised the same issue. The state doesn't tax prescription drugs. Is that right?
Right. And in our sales tax code, we do not tax prescription drugs.
Could a city tax prescription drugs?
As a home rule city, you have that authority, but I can tell you that nobody else does.
Right. But anyway, this is not a prescription drug, is it?
That's correct.
Medical marijuana is not a prescription drug.
Right. It needs a license to operate the facility, but it's not a prescription drug. Although it does take a physician's authorization, but it's not described as a prescription as such.
But it's more like an over-the-counter type of remedy.
As long as a physician has signed off on the fact that you have a need for this type of drug. I'll refer to it as drug.
I mean, sometimes physicians prescribe over-the-counter remedies, too. Well, that just clarifies in my mind. It's not a prescription drug. But it's been kind of compared to that, it seems, and there is no comparison. Thank you.
Ms. Carson.
Mr. Flannery, do you know the surrounding cities, what their tax base is compared to ours?
Are you, Councilwoman Carson, are you mentioning, are you referring to tax base as far as this specific issue or industrial?
This specific issue. If somebody is selling medical marijuana in Denver, Aurora, Brighton, Thornton, whatever, what tax is going to be imposed on that? Is it the same as ours, or is it higher than ours?
Well, maybe I can, I don't know if Roger's still here or not. Maybe have Roger did some research specifically on this issue. As far as I know, there's 3 cities, Breckenridge, and then I didn't get by an email I received from Roger earlier on, but there's 2 other cities that have about 5% as a sales tax. This
on top of?
On top of whatever their sales base is that exists. So if we did a 5%, it would be on top of.
Right, and I am always under the belief that we have very low tax here. And maybe that's just someplace I like to stay and believe, but I believe we do. And so if we added the 5%, or whatever, if it was 3%, what is it that puts us in line with those other jurisdictions?
Go ahead, yeah.
The sales tax that we have is basically middle of the range for all of the cities in the area. There's some that are high as 4.25. We're at 3.5%. There's a few that are down in the 2%, 3% range. There aren't many cities that have figured out what to do with medical marijuana at this point. And so I'm aware of 2 cities that passed the tax but didn't authorize having dispensaries within their boundaries. So they have a 5% tax on medical marijuana in addition to their sales tax, but they did not authorize dispensaries.
so it was kind of a moot case in both those situations. There's a city I'm aware of that is proposing a 5% excise tax this fall on their ballot, which would be in addition to the sales tax.
Which city is that?
That's Breckenridge, as I understand it. Now, the gentleman that spoke earlier talked in terms of Breckenridge already having a tax, but that's not the information I received from Breckenridge. So I'll follow up to confirm where they're at actually in their process, and I was not aware of Granby, so I'll follow up on that as well.
And maybe I can address a more general topic is our ordinance that we approved as a city allows the dispensaries, but it has a number of high bar requirements to meet. So I think in general, the general philosophy was that if this was going to be allowed in the city, that there would be a thought that there would be in other places they call it a sin tax, for drinks, for alcoholic drinks or different types of tobacco. Well, this would be similar to that in the form of a tax on the actual prescription that's being sold. So it would be potentially used to offset impacts to the community, either through more police patrol, more services for population that may locate within the city to be closer to those facilities. It could be a number of impacts that we don't even know. I think the best example to look towards is maybe California, where they've had it quite a while. A lot of those cities certainly have seen an impact, and what they've done is really increased the amount. Because at Tabor, we need to go to an election for that, and so that's the discussion. If you're going to have them, should they create revenue to offset some of their impacts?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Marino?
Mr. Gaylor, I had some questions about the actual language that's proposed in the ballot initiative. Why is it that we describe this as simply marijuana and not medical marijuana, which it is?
We, in the ballot issue that you should have in front of you, we describe it as marijuana, marijuana paraphernalia, marijuana-infused products, and synthetic marijuana products. Is that the one you're looking at?
So why is it not then? Why do we not use the appropriate language, medical marijuana, rather than just marijuana?
The rationale, when I drafted this, is that it would tax any sale of marijuana, whether it was legal medical marijuana or illegal marijuana. And so if someone were arrested for dealing in marijuana, there would still be a tax that could be imposed upon any revenues that was derived from that sale. It's just a judgment call, but I just thought, since we're engaged in this issue, that we should make it as broadly as possible. It's not too different than the Al Capone cases back in the late 30s, where he was tried and convicted of all things of income tax evasion on illegal sales of alcohol. So you can take it for that, or you can limit it to medical marijuana if you choose. But bear in mind, this is just my wording as a ballot issue that I proposed. I did get some samples from CML to help me in this regard, but I have expanded it somewhat. And an additional observation, just as we're talking here this evening, I say in the amount of, there's nothing that would prohibit you from saying in amount not to exceed, and then what you could do, if you chose to, by ordinance as you go, increase it as you deem appropriate, up to that amount that the ballot issue authorizes. That's just another thought. Because bear in mind, right now, our zoning issue, our zoning for this issue is probably, and I shouldn't say probably, I would say is, the most restrictive of any city that I'm familiar with. Because you got, first of all, a very restricted industrial area, plus you've got a conditional use requirement on top of that. So, you know, it remains to be seen how many actual facilities you get in the city. But that's a whole nother issue for another discussion at another time. Right now, what you need to decide is how you want to handle this ballot issue if you choose to go forward with it. Because we're going to have, based on the discussion tonight, you're going to have an ordinance then come back to you that spells out the ballot issues and spells out it sets the title for the ballot and calls for the election on November 1, 2011. And that ordinance will do all those things.
In those municipal league templates that you reviewed, did they refer to marijuana generally, or did they refer to medical marijuana specifically?
One of them referred to medical marijuana, and one of them referred to marijuana. And my concern with the one, when I first read the one that said marijuana, and then I talked to CML a little more on that, because I had the question in my mind, does that imply that you're trying to legitimatize marijuana? And when someone votes for it, they're going to say, okay, I'm authorizing taxing of marijuana. Does that mean that we're saying that we're going to make marijuana legitimate in the city? So that's, that's the downside of saying just marijuana. But the upside is that you're able to tax any illegal sales that take place. So you weigh it.
Think of what we'd made on those buses.
And I've lost my thought. Thank you, Mayor.
That was my plan.
My concern is just what you said, the implicit suggestion that we are validating marijuana sales in Commerce City versus medical marijuana. The two, I believe, are different. I know some people do not distinguish the two, but the voters have said that they believe marijuana is appropriate for medicinal use, and as such, I believe it deserves a separate category.
As an aside, when I worked for Department of Revenue, we would sell marijuana stamps when marijuana was illegal. Nobody would ever come in for them, but that gave us the option of when we seized marijuana, we were able to tax them on that since they were supposed to have purchased a stamp. So it would play the same way. Mr. Benson.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Gaylor, is there anything, any legal problem with a 10% tax? I guess.
My answer to that, first of all, the easy answer to that is I would say 10% on top of the 3.5% is probably you're getting close to the rule is you can't pass a tax that's going to be confiscatory. That means to the point of a business not being able to operate. But I don't think 10% goes that far. Certainly 30% would be going that far. But the other side of the coin is that like has been mentioned earlier this evening by Councilwoman Carson even, that you're in an area that you're taxing it higher than any other surrounding municipality is. So if that's a concern, that would be a consideration. But I don't think it's illegal to say 10%.
And I just want to,
If you go that far, let me just add this to it. If you are thinking in terms of that high a number, you might say in the amount not to exceed 10%, and then that gives you, the council, discretion now and in years go by to increase it if you choose to, depending on how much police work is necessary for a facility, even how many facilities we get in the city. It may vary with the amount of money that you feel is appropriate to raise from this type of activity. So that's another consideration.
I just wanted to make the point, I know we're talking about a lot of detail on this particular issue, but we cannot pass this tax. This has to go to the voters.
Right.
We're just saying, here's something that you can vote on and pass if that's what you want. If you don't want it, then it's done. It's up to the voters to do this, as long as we give them a choice. We can't pass the tax. They can. That's all we're doing here. It's just, I would again yield to the gentleman from Ward 1 on my right.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Just to follow up on your language specifically, Bob, to say in the amount not to exceed 10%, for example, would the council then, what is the timeline then for with the council deciding what the appropriate percentage is?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked that question because I should clarify. If this ballot issue passes, then the city would need to adopt an ordinance to implement this ballot issue. So you would adopt an ordinance that would include, among other things, the percentage that you would then want up to the amount that the voters authorized. And you do that, since it's an ordinance, you can amend it as time goes by as you see fit to do so. That'd be the advantage of having the ballot issue written that way.
That's all I had. So.
Thank you. And Mr. Marino, what happens is other people were ahead of you, and when you jump, it's not fair to them. So if you could wait when your turn comes around, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Bullock.
Yes, I have no problem with the language that Mr. Gaylor just said, percentage not more than a certain percentage. And I would say, in my mind, I was looking at 7%. And then I look at the fact that you say within our borders, we can only have so many because of the industrial area. But then I look right outside our borders. On 50th and Vasquez, on 50th and Colorado Boulevard, and on 48th and 48th Avenue is a little triangle. There are 3 medicinal marijuana spots that have already popped up. And I mean, these are right outside of our border. And so then I start thinking to myself, and this is just my thoughts, that why do we need so many of them that close together? And so I have no, putting a 7% tax on it and saying that if you're going to be within the borders of Commerce City, this is what you have to pay, doesn't bother me one bit, because the ones that are sitting right outside our borders don't have that tax on it. And if the person doesn't want to buy from us in our city and pay our tax, all they have to do is basically drive less than a mile more, and they can go right into Denver with the same prescription and buy. As to the wording of marijuana, I would love to keep that, because most cities say marijuana for medicinal use. But after we had that bust here about 2 weeks ago, if we had had the tax on it then, the tax that they would have had to pay for that, just using the word marijuana, because marijuana can be legal or illegal. Medicinal marijuana is legal as long as a person has a prescription. But there are a lot of people that are dealing in non-medicinal marijuana, which we call recreational marijuana, and if they were to get busted within our city with the drug, I would want them to see the same consequence as the person that's paying that percentage of a tax for a legal establishment. And that might, I doubt it very seriously because it hasn't done it anywhere else, but it might make people think about not being caught here with it, because not only do you go to jail, you pay a tax on it too. So that's my thought, but I would like to see the percentage is not more than 7%.
Ms. Carson?
Just to clarify, if we put a cap on that saying not more than, then if it's this council's wishes, if that passes, you could put 3% there. And if we find that it's costing us more money than that in our public services, that we, as council, don't have to go back to the voters and could take it to 5%. Am I understanding?
That's exactly right, right.
And so until you reach whatever that maximum amount was, you never have to go back to the voters.
That's exactly right.
And the only problem that I have with the way this reads is the juvenile delinquency prevention. I would like for it just to say that it's going to public safety. Just,
Yeah, that's, could very well be said that way.
yeah, I don't know whose juvenile delinquency prevention. If you give it to public safety, they can decide which programs we really need to fund, I think, so.
Yeah, the public safety clause probably includes juvenile delinquency prevention too, so that's a good point. It's probably a superfluous wording to say and juvenile delinquency.
If I could, maybe I can ask Bob a question as well as try to answer. You also have, I think, that flexibility, just as you did in the percentage. If the ordinance comes back to you, I think at that time you can actually start identifying specific areas in public safety.
You're right. That's true.
Bless you.
Do we need somebody or everyone on council to agree to remove that delinquency?
I think that when you get through with your discussion, then I'm making notes here and I'll summarize what it sounds to me like you want, and then we'll get a consensus on that, and then we can go
I don't know
forward.
what that board looks like over there, but are we about ready for us all to?
It looks like Councilman Moreno's the only one
Okay.
left. Yeah. Councilman Moreno.
Just quickly, I will support Councilwoman Carson's request to omit that language. And I do like Councilman Bullock's suggestion not to exceed 7%. It allows council to have that flexibility so we can see the direct results if any additional public safety appropriation is needed. I do appreciate that flexibility, so I would support Councilman Bullock's request for the language not to exceed 7%.
Okay.
Are we ready? If nobody else has any comment, what I've got from this discussion then is that we would have in an amount not to exceed 7%. We would also strike juvenile delinquency prevention. I'm not totally clear on whether you've reached some consensus on this issue about having it read medical marijuana or just marijuana. There was some division on that.
Does council want to do a consensus on that, or?
I would like to see just marijuana, because if any marijuana is in the city that's illegal, I would like to see that fine too, at the same tax rate.
Okay. Councilman Diaz?
I'm still thinking.
Okay. Councilman Moreno?
I know Councilman, I'm interested to hear what Councilman Carson says.
Councilwoman Carson?
All marijuana use.
Councilman Moreno?
No?
I guess just with my concern with having it, with it reading simply marijuana is, as Mr. Gaylor referenced, that implicit suggestion that we are condoning all marijuana use above and beyond medical. My other concern is that obviously we have youth in the community. I think it's fair to say that either engage in some various use or dealing of that. And what I would hate to see is those youth above and beyond having the city sue them for appropriate tax on beyond what they're already convicted for, which is selling illegal drugs. I don't know how that works, though. Maybe they could take it out of their profit of what they were selling. Mr. Gaylor, do you have any recommendations on that issue?
Well, there's always a problem of collection. It's one thing to say they owe it, and then it's another thing to collect it. In that scenario, you probably, with minors that don't have any income, it would cost the city more money to proceed with the civil action to try and collect it than what it's worth. It would be more of a judgment call on the part of the city as to when and where we proceed to try and collect the debt, just like any other debt that is owed. But it aims more at the big bust. I mean, that's one that would be certainly worth our while, and we would move on that one. So it's a matter of judgment. If you pass it this way, the city would have to decide on a case-by-case basis whether it's worth going after. And we have to do that on sales tax issues. You know, if we have someone owing us $50 on sales tax, we don't pursue that collection. The one concern I have, and I'm not talking against leaving it as it's written, but I'm hoping that the issue doesn't fail at the ballot box because somebody thinks I'm not going to vote for it because it looks like I'm voting for the sales of medical marijuana. People would have to understand what the ballot issue is about, and I'd hate to see it go down because of that misunderstanding.
Mr. Marino out here.
Please.
If you purchase something in this city legally, you will pay a tax on it. So all purchases in this city should be taxed.
Regardless of legality. I will agree. I will agree with you. I'm fine with simply marijuana. My only concern is that we do tell the community that we're not condoning use. We're just, for example, the mayor brought up the situation with the large bust that occurred. The city probably would have gotten a hefty chunk of change out of that situation. So I will support that.
And I will add, if I may, Mr. Mayor, on this, is that since this is a Tabor issue, if you recall, there is an opportunity for written statement in support and opposing to be sent to all the registered electors. So that issue could be explained. It can't be submitted by a council member, but by any citizen it can. Am I right?
Council or staff may not.
Right. It certainly can be covered.
Understood. Thank you.
Ms. Carson?
Oh,
Are you done? It's okay. Mr. Benson?
I've heard the up to 7%. I don't know why we don't make it up to 10%, since it would be up to the council to figure out whether it was going to be 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. Why limit it to 7%? And if we decided to go higher than that, we've got to go back to another Tabor vote. We say up to 10%, we've got the authority to do anything that we wanted to up to that amount. So I think it ought to be up to 10%. Doesn't mean it's going to be 10%, it's just up to that we're authorized by a Tabor vote to do.
Okay. Do we want to go down the line on just the number? Because that seems to be the only thing that's undecided. Mr. Marino?
7.
Mr. Benson?
10.
Ms. Carson?
7.
Ms. Snyder?
10.
Mr. Diaz?
7.
Mr. Bullock? 7. And mine was 10, but doesn't make any difference because it's 7. Okay?
That concludes the issues that I have on ballot question number 1. I think that's the most difficult one. Number 2 has to do with really a house, what I'll refer to as a housekeeping issue in our city charter, because as the charter now reads, it's really based upon the elections that we had in April. And now, since we've moved to November and we have coordinated elections with the county, we're dealing with the state law that sets when certification of results of the election can take place. And that certification happens to be after what we have in the charter now for our organization meeting. So what happens, and it did happen last time, is we had council members sworn in at the organization meeting before the ballot was actually certified. Now, that only becomes a problem if the close vote certification shows somebody didn't get elected, and we'd have already sworn them in. So this ballot issue just clears up in our charter that the organization meeting will be held at least after the certification of the results of the election. And that's what this is about. So any questions on that?
Ms. Carson?
No, yes and no, not on that. But the question is, and I should have brought this forward a long time ago, but since we're putting these ballot measures on there about council, if this council supports it, is it too late to add something? Because according to our charter, you cannot do 2 terms as a city council person on here and then consecutively run for mayor and do 16 continuous years. I don't believe this city benefits from that. I believe that anybody who has sat here for 2 terms has some expertise, and this city has gotten to know them very well, whether they want them to be their mayor then. So I think we do ourselves a great disservice. Could we add language such as that, or is it too late, Ms. Bauer? Mr. Gaylor, I don't know who answers.
And we've put that vote up twice to the citizens, and both times it's been voted down.
But since we're already putting stuff there, is there a cost that's going to be associated with this, or is it going to be minimal since we're just tagging on to all these others?
First of all, it's not too late. It's a matter of my drafting it. But remember, your ordinance is coming up on the 15th for first reading. So we really are right at the wire. So it's not too late. I would have to, I'm not so certain that it appears in just one place in the charter. I'd have to spend some time, and we would have to dissect the charter to see where that would fit in. I think there are probably 4 or 5 places where it refers to the mayor as being a member of the city council. And of course, that's what
So it's that language that...
That's the language that hurts this issue. For other cities, as you may be aware, they have determined that the mayor is a separate office from the city council. But
So if we amend that charter just to read the mayor is a different office, would
Right.
it fix that other language?
Well, we would want to make sure that all the language is consistent. It's not like just putting one clause in to say that the mayor is separate, because you got these other clauses that would say differently. So now you got it's a poorly drafted charter when you've got one clause saying one thing and another clause saying another. So we'd want to amend all of them. So if the council chose to do that, I would need to know tonight, really, to be able to get that, because really our agendas are supposed to be out now for next week's meeting.
Sorry.
So we're right at the wire and then some.
Are you looking for a response from me? I've been a firm believer in term limits for as long as I've been around. It's the only way. I don't care what you tell the voters about. You can vote people out. They never do. The incumbent always wins. But that's my personal opinion. I'm not for it. They have members of this council, a past mayor and one of our present council people, have put that out in the past, and both times it failed. I don't want to tie it into this or to do another one. I just, to me, my personal opinion is it's been out there twice. And you know what? I would love that you could run for mayor at the end of your 8 years. But sometimes you need new blood. I am so happy to see these two young guys here. Sometimes you need that new blood, and that's the way you get it. I understand what you're saying about you get it, but I'm a firm believer as you're a manager and you've got 5 or 6 years, 7 years maybe of bringing in new things, and then you just start repeating yourself. I love seeing new people up here all the time. That's how the Constitution was set up. Get in here, work for a few years, and get back on the farm.
But our charter allows you to set out and continually keep coming
Yes,
back.
you could, but usually at the end of 4 years being out, you've been forgotten.
I think there's proof here, too.
No, that's a whole other story we don't want to get into tonight.
No, but anyway, no, that was my thought. Like I said, I thought that 8 years brings expertise up here, so.
Do we just want to go down the list, or are you looking for an answer from your question? Okay. Mr. Bullock?
Mr. Gaylor, seeing how that this election would be what ratified this, it wouldn't be part of this election, would it? This housekeeping nature?
No, because you'd have to be running at this election in order to take advantage of that amendment. So it would take effect
at the next election.
For the next election. Yeah.
So we would still run into the housekeeping issue this time. We would actually put them in office at the reorganization meeting before the county certifies the ballot measure. This time. Okay, Ms. Bauer keeps shaking her head, yes. So I was just thinking that because of how our charter reads and everything does, what we do at the election doesn't take part in this election. It takes part at the next election. So this is to clean it up in the future, but it isn't going to clean it up for this election. Okay, that's my thought. I'm okay with the language in this and everything because it's perfect housekeeping for our council. For our city, I should say, not for our council, for our city.
If I may, was the consensus on that issue or the consensus on whether or not you want to have this term limits thing?
No, that's completely unrelated at this point.
Okay, your consensus on this?
At this point. Okay, what I was thinking is we were planning on this, and then we'd go back to Ms. Carson on her term limits.
That's good. Right.
So, before we start through the list again, I just want to bring up just a small challenge. When it says we'll include the taking of oath of office for newly elected members of City Council and the appointment of the Mayor Pro Tem. If you were to have a mayor who was new, who was not familiar with the people who was on council, they would need to come forward on their first meeting and pick a pro tem that they may not even know and may not pick the right person. That could be a little bit of a challenge.
The only reason why it's worded this way is because the present charter says at the organization meeting that appointment takes place. It doesn't mean it has to take place that night. It just, if we change this, it could change it as you are.
But it says shall include.
As it's written now.
Yes.
You're right. But I'm saying that you could alter that wording tonight to tell me if you wanted something different.
Yeah, for a new mayor with no background, That would be a tough call. You'd have to just look and see who is dressed the nicest.
Yeah, the downside of that is that you're going to operate for a short period of time without a mayor pro tem, I guess.
God, that would, in my case, it would be horrible, but in most cases, it wouldn't be that big a deal. You know,
I can write it however you choose.
it was just an idea. I just kept thinking, when I walked in here, I may not have known who I wanted at that point.
Of course. Now, and I'm not campaigning for one way or the other on this, so don't misunderstand me. The way this is set up is that the organization meeting would not be until after approximately 30 days or thereabouts after the election, so that person that's elected knows that he has been elected, so he does have some period of time to get acquainted with who's on the console.
Would that be the average time a month, do you think? Then it would be fine. I'd be fine with leaving it the way it is. I was thinking just coming right in, it'd be a week or two. and
Well,
you may
the
not
certification is what, 17 days they could have? 17 days.
know. Okay.
So then you're having an organization meeting after the 17 days.
That would be fine. I don't have any problem with it because that would give somebody plenty of time to interview the other 8 people. Okay. Never mind. Okay. So only on question 2. Then we will come back to Ms. Carson's request for an additional. Because, Ms. Carson, make sure I understand, you don't want it added into this, correct? You want it as a separate question. Good. Okay. So only looking at this, does anyone else have any challenges with the way that it's worded now? Mr. Bullock?
No.
Mr. Diaz? Mr. Marino?
Just a caveat. With both question 2 and 3, I kind of see them as somewhat a missed opportunity. We have a lot, I think, of issues that we maybe will need to work out in our charter eventually, and we could have packaged them all as one and sent them to the voters. So I would recommend that in the future, if we're considering charter amendments, that we have a thorough review of the charter and we can package them as cleanup amendments to the charter. But no, I don't have any issue with the way this is worded.
In that regard, you do have to be careful with the one issue for each ballot issue. You know, you can't lump numerous issues into one ballot question, but that's a whole nother discussion, so.
The other outstanding piece of that is that you don't know what you're going to get for citizen-initiated charter amendment questions.
Mr. Benson?
I have no problem with the ballot language that's proposed for number 2.
Ms. Carson?
No problem.
Ms. Snyder?
No problem.
Okay. Mr. Benson, do you have another comment, though?
I was going to comment about Ms. Carson's suggestion.
Okay.
Whenever that's
And we're going to get
appropriate.
back to that one. Mr. Reno, did you have another? Okay. If it's okay with council, can we go on to question 3, then go to Ms. Carson, which would be question 4?
If you pass me that water down there.
She needs that water.
I had my eye on it, too.
Well, you can go for Jason's.
Okay. So we'll move on to question 3, please.
Question 3
thank you.
has to do with the amendment of the charter to remove the provision that provides for 2 members of the city council sitting on the planning commission. And you have talked about that several times with me and staff, and this ballot issue is drafted in accord with the direction that I previously received, that you would not have any member of the city council sitting on the planning commission, and then it goes on to provide for a staggered term so that you don't have everybody's term expiring at the same time. So this says no more than 2 would expire at any one time, and they are 3-year terms. That's what they are now, so that doesn't change anything. So what, in effect, what you'd have is 2 1 year, 2 another year, and 1 the 3rd year. And that's the way this ballot question is drafted.
Okay. Mr. Benson, do you have comments on this?
I'll take my light off. I just wanted to comment on what Ms. Carson had said.
Mr. Bullock?
Yes, Mr. Scott Jakewood brought an interesting point up to me when we were discussing this, when he watched it on television and he saw this. He said that as a council, you're forsaking your duty to be part of a commission that actually monitors the city. If the Planning Commission at any time and planning gets together and they decide that they want to go in different directions than the council, basically you're going back, and no matter what you say that it's just a Planning Commission, it's just a commission vote, it is a vote that carries weight, and you have to show just cause to change their commission vote. And somebody, he said that when he was watching it on TV, somebody said something about the educational factor of how long is the learning curve on being on Planning Commission. Well, being on any commission and being on City Council is a learning curve. And if you aren't going to take time to learn planning and street widths and what are radiuses and stuff, and know that sometimes that things can be done administratively that the council and the city does not want to see, then you aren't doing your duty as a council person. Never use education as an excuse not to be on a commission or a board or anything, because if you don't want to take time to learn what this commission or board does, you shouldn't be on council. And he says that under no circumstances should we be giving up our membership on the Planning Commission, because we're the oversight on the Planning Commission, and the minute that oversight's gone, we have done something to the city that the charter members said that they wanted to make sure that the Planning Commission moves in the direction of the City Council, not the City Council moving in the direction of the Planning Commission and the planning staff. We are the last word between the citizens and the staff, because we're the ones that are elected to do the job. They are appointed and they are paid. And those are totally different ideals that the citizens did not put them on there. We did. And if we're going to put them on there, we should have the oversight to watch them. And I have to agree with him, so that's just the thoughts that were brought forth. And he says he wants council to think really hard about this before you put this question on the ballot and you give up your oversight, and at some given time in the future things go wrong in the city and you just sit there and look at yourself and say it's our own fault.
Mr. Marino?
Well, I can't help but completely disagree. I think, this is an issue where council is not giving up its oversight. Council still has final authority. We're making this into some kind of doomsday scenario where the Planning Commission will go and approve all these crazy projects that we don't want to see done, when City Council still has the final say. And do I think my time on Planning Commission has been valuable? Yes. But I would still get that experience, that knowledge, if I was sitting out in the audience or if I was a planning commissioner. It's incumbent upon council members to go and educate themselves on Planning Commission related issues, to sit in the audience and to see what Planning Commission and where they're coming from, to read the minutes. We get the minutes from the Planning Commission when we have our packet on the same project. There's been multiple times where this council has disagreed with the Planning Commission. We have asserted our authority in denying their recommendations. A recent example is the Bell Creek scenery, the barrier that they would like to put up. That was a split decision on the Planning Commission, and this council approved it unanimously. So I don't see any issue with I don't see any issue with the city vesting our citizens with the right and the privilege of getting involved in their city, of getting the experience that will eventually aid them in city-related matters. I think that we should trust our citizens with that responsibility.
Mr. Benson?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Gaylor, this is a question for you. What weight does the Planning Commission recommendation carry? Mr. Bullock used the word that we had to have just cause. What, in order to change that, well, what weight does it carry? What's our...
The way we have it structured in Commerce City, and this is not uncommon, is the Planning Commission's recommendation is some evidence in the same manner as a witness presents evidence to the City Council. So when that recommendation of the Planning Commission comes forward, that is part of the record, and that recommendation is evidence for you to consider just as you would a witness testifying. So one thing that does help for the City Council, the way I've structured the Planning Commission proceedings, is that the Planning Commission makes findings and then to support their decision. So when it comes before council, you as a council, you don't have to make new findings all over if you agree with the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Your motion, if you recall, is you approve the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission. That process means you've adopted those findings, so you don't have to make brand new findings. So we're not sitting here after a public hearing is completed and trying to write out the findings. You already got them there in front of you. Now, if you disagree with the recommendation of the Planning Commission, then I have to prepare a set of findings for you on the spot, and then you adopt those findings and make your own decision as far as what findings you want. But to answer your question, that is some evidence, but it certainly isn't conclusive. You just weigh it along with the other evidence in the case.
So the council can do anything it wants as long as it's not acting in an arbitrary or capricious manner.
Right. Here's where the sticker comes. Let's say nobody appears, and all you have in front of you is a recommendation of the Planning Commission. So now your public hearing you've held, and you've got one bit of evidence, and that's the recommendation of the Planning Commission. And you have the applicant, I'm assuming. So you've got that evidence to support granting it, and then you want to deny it. You don't have any evidence to deny it unless there's someone to present evidence in opposition. But that's the only caveat that I would have, is that the Planning Commission's recommendation and findings is evidence for you that you need to listen to unless you have other evidence to refute it.
Are you saying that if it is the only evidence that we would have to approve it?
Basically, when you think about it, your decision has to be based upon some evidence in the record. And if there is no other evidence in the record to support your decision, you have to vote as you do in favor of the evidence. But as a practical matter, as long as I've been doing this, a city council generally isn't going to vote against something if you don't have somebody in the audience speaking against it.
Right.
That's the saving grace of this whole thing. You have some evidence against it, and you have some in favor, so you can go either way and not be wrong.
Well, with all due respect to Mr. Jakewith's comments, Mr. Bullock, I think that we're safe here.
I'm going to tell you where you're wrong, and I can bring a case for it from the Planning Commission that came to this city, and it was totally different than where the city's direction wanted to go on council. And they went against the Planning Commission without other evidence, and it was on street widths. When we were doing subdivisions up north, and the Planning Commission brought forth a 34-foot street width. And council did not go with it. They wanted a bigger street width. And they proved in council on the dais here that fire trucks would have a hard time getting around on a 34-foot street width. And we went against the facts and findings of the Planning Commission. And we, as a council, did that. So,
Well, was there evidence presented to that
the
effect?
evidence was presented at the Planning Commission, but the councilmen on the Planning Commission didn't have enough education on street widths. None of them had never been firemen before, and none of them had never tried to turn around an emergency vehicle on a 34-foot street. After all this was brought forth by a person on council that was a fireman, his name is Rocky Teeter, it was completely overturned. So if we had had him on the Planning Commission, it would have never been brought forth with those findings. Sometimes you just got to stay the course. And see, what you just said is, Mr. Bullock, I think Scott Jakeworth isn't right. I just proved to you where you were wrong in saying he wasn't right. It isn't making you wrong, but it's showing that why we should have somebody on the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Your first comment was, Mr. Bullock, I think was safe, and you were going to show me how Scott Jakeworth was wrong in his comments. And I showed you how he wasn't.
I know, and I still think that we have enough oversight. If people don't know enough about construction projects on this council to at least read the recommendations of the Planning Commission, then maybe we should get another council.
If you had been on the council when we were doing yards and how many square feet we needed in yards, and we were doing house planning, how many square feet in a house, and you saw what the Planning Commission brought forth. Mr. Gaylor, do you remember the Planning Commission's first, when they brought it to the council, it was something like 900 square feet in the house, and we kicked it up to 1028? And it was a 5-0 vote bringing it to us. I can give you numerous examples, Mr. Benson. I was just going to do one, but I could do yards. I can do FARs. I can go a lot where we need to have council presence on the Planning Commission.
It's lit up, so we're going to...
Well, it will be up to the people of the city to determine that.
Yeah. Ms. Carson?
Mr. Gaylor, this is probably for you. In the time I've been here, there was one event, it never did occur. It was Carapace Homes. When I go back and look at that, we would have probably, are we better off as council if we wouldn't have been sitting in that Planning Commission at the time?
Well, you know, there are certainly two sides of this argument, and that's why it is a debate here. The advantage, if you will, of a city council member sitting on the Planning Commission is that, or two members, if you will, is that you have some continuity of that discussion that took place at the Planning Commission, because sometimes you do have things presented in front of one body that aren't presented in the other, in front of the other body, and you do have that continuity. So that's one advantage. The disadvantage of it is the argument that this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, and you have two members of the City Council sitting on the Planning Commission, and are they in a position then, if you will, of railroading the decision through the City Council? So that's the argument against it. The two members on the Planning Commission have to divorce themselves from a prejudgment and end up saying that, hey, I'll listen to the evidence before the City Council and make my decision in order to keep the quasi-judicial proceeding free of an argument that it wasn't a fair hearing before the City Council. So You know, that's always an issue when, and I've had members on the on the planning commission ask me that time and time again about, hey, isn't this a case of hearing evidence outside the hearing before the city council? Well, it is, except that it happens to be authorized by law, because if you will, when that charter was written, Commerce City was a home rule city, was a statutory city at that time. And the state statute applied to Commerce City as a statutory city. So when the charter was written, that particular provision was simply copied from the state statute that applied to statutory cities and just continued the same practice, because at that time Commerce City didn't want to change the practice, and they had 2 members of the city council sitting on the planning commission, because that's what the statute said for a statutory city. So they just kept the same process in effect. And of course, at that time, the city was only 15,000 people, so we've come a long way since then. So now you're confronted with the question whether or not you should change it or not. Councilman Bullock has raised issues that have come up in the past. But of course, the answer to that is, I suppose, that, hey, as a city council, you always have the final say, and if you get the right information before city council, you didn't have the advantage of 2 council members sitting on the planning commission now to hear it the first time around. So you got to recognize that there needs to be, I would think, more preparation by the city council when you have a zoning case coming in front of you, because you don't have the advantage of 2 council members to carry forth that information that they heard at the planning commission.
And am I correct in my understanding that we are one of, if not the only city who does it this way, that has council sitting on?
You know, and that could very well be true. Certainly, with a home rule city, that could very well be true, because home rule cities can set their own standards. Now, the state statute for statutory cities, which are smaller cities or towns, still has that provision in it, but that's for statutory cities. So you may be right, and I'm not really prepared to answer that. I know when I was city attorney for Brighton, Brighton was still a statutory city, and of course, they did it that way with 2 members on the planning commission. But since now they're home rule city, and they probably do it differently now, you know better than I, perhaps.
They do it differently. So, but no, that was my questions. Thank you.
Ms. Snyder?
Yeah, I mean, you could go either way with this. I mean, if you sat there and said, you know, I've heard both sides of it, you know, and I've thought about this a lot, and I think I have to go with Councilman Bullock on this. I think that there is advantages to having a couple council members sit on the planning commission. It's just my one person's opinion, but I think that, you know, our forefathers, you know, had a good idea of what they wanted and what they thought should be in the city charter, and I trust that. So I'm fine with leaving I have to say I'm fine with leaving council members on the planning commission.
Would you let me go first? Thank you. I served on the planning committee as a citizen and then as a council person. If I went against what the council said, I knew that I wouldn't be sitting there very long. And I think that this council has that ability to remove those people if they went rogue. My challenge was, as a citizen, it was great. I loved it. You really got to see what was going on in the city. As a council person, I hated it, because I had to listen to them twice, and then I would have to take different evidence at ours than we had at the first one, because the people would learn why they got turned down originally and and so they would change their story when they got here. As far as coming up with a thing where we would have to come up with a reason, having a fireman on the council, whether we had one or not, if evidence came from this council, the evidence is still there, and we can vote whatever way we feel we should vote. I just This has been something that Mac's been after for years and years and years, and I think he's right. You have those two people on council, and those three people look at them and say, okay, how are we supposed to vote tonight? They may not say that in their voice, but they're saying it in their minds, because I know that's what I was doing going in as a citizen. I was looking at those two council people saying, okay, what am I supposed to do? That's not the way that should be run. It's not. Mr. Marino, your turn.
I'll just say that, you know, in both situations that Councilman Bullock raised, at the end of the day, council overrided the decision of the Planning Commission, which is an authority we still maintain under this. What we're doing is we're empowering our citizens to get involved in their community, to learn about the community, to be able to become educated citizens and contribute their talents and their viewpoints, because they live in certain areas of the city and they know when things are, when a project comes up, if that project will be beneficial to the community or not. So I would just say that I don't think we're making a dangerous or wrong decision here. I think this is an outdated provision of our charter, and we're finally, hopefully, going to cure that.
Mr. Bullock?
The mayor just said something that kind of stuck in my head, where he said that he would listen to it the first time, then he would have to listen to it again, and the people got smart enough to come in and change enough to, and if he hadn't heard it the first time, he wouldn't have known of that change. And whether that change is good or bad, it's the fact that the change isn't the same thing that the Planning Commission was bringing forward. It was a change. And that is one of the safeguards and one of the fail-safes that having a council person on the Planning Commission does. And I would go so far, I want to, but I would go so far as to go down to one. But I think we should have a presence on the Planning Commission. Would that be a problem, Bob, changing from 2 to 1?
I can rewrite.
Okay. Can we go down the line and just see how we're going? Mr. Marino?
Regarding Councilman Bullock's proposal, the number of representatives on the Planning Commission is not the issue. It's simply that city council members are on the Planning Commission, and the legal liabilities that opens up, that situation opens up for this city. So I am in support of the ordinance as drafted, and I don't believe that we should consider having any representation on the Planning Commission.
Okay. Mr. Benson?
I support the referendum as it's drafted.
Ms. Carson?
I also.
Ms. Snyder?
I'm fine with putting it to a vote of the people.
Mr. Diaz?
I support it as well.
Mr. Bullock?
Mr. Gaylor, what legal liabilities are we under with the city council being on the Planning Commission?
The only thing I can think of, and correct me if I'm not reading you right on this, is that if you have members of the city council on the Planning Commission and they've let it be known that when it comes before city council that they prejudge the case, and in effect what is said at the city council meeting doesn't have any effect on their decision. They've already made their decision. The result would be is that the vote of the city council could be thrown out because it was prejudged and was an illegal quasi-judicial proceeding. Am I reading you right?
Just to add on to that, Mr. Gaylor, the situation that we currently have just does not pass conventional wisdom. Having a planning commissioner a council member as a member of the Planning Commission, hear a case, and then somehow have to be completely unbiased and hear it again as a council member is not conventional wisdom, does not pass common sense. So that is my issue when I describe legal liabilities.
So, Ms. right now, we are 2, 4, 5. My vote will be the same, so 6 to yours, Mr. Bullock, but do you want to take a stand just saying no? Just to
I'm
take
going
the
to
stand?
say, I'll take my stand for me and Mr. Jaquith.
Okay. It's as written, sir. Now going back to Ms. Carson's. I want to go back to you because hopefully during this time you've come up with a few ideas on how you'd like this to read, or at least an idea. I'm not saying words. I'm saying you have an idea of what you're looking for. Then we can put that up to discussion.
Well, no, I've been engaged in thought here, but my understanding of the charter is you can do a full 8 years in any one of these positions, whether council member or mayor, and you set out a term, and you can come back and do another. And then you set out, and you can come back, and you set out. Okay, 4 times, right?
4 years. You could do it indefinitely. 4 year in between.
Okay, so you
Set
set
out
out a
4
full
years.
term.
Yeah.
And so indefinitely, as Ms. Snyder said, you can continue to do this, which
If you can get elected.
absolutely, if you can get elected.
Or be appointed after.
Yeah. I just think that, in one sense, what the mayor said, I fully agree with. When you're done, you need, even if you're not smart enough to go away, we're going to tell you to go away. 16 years max. Because it is.
No, it would be 8 years max.
No, not under my proposal. My proposal is you could, that what it should say, what we're going to change it to, is you could do 2 full terms as a council person, and then automatically go into running for the mayor. And if you win that, you got another 4 years, and you could run for mayor again, and you'd get another 4 years, and then you were done.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Okay.
Done.
You wouldn't go back to being a council person.
That's right. You can never
Okay.
run again. You're 16 years, you're up.
Okay.
I just think that this is silly, that we don't allow people to take their expertise and people who have represented this city well to continue to sit here and to move into some form. So this has nothing to do with the election that's coming up. It has nothing to do with anybody running. But I came in as a seated member with a mayor who had already been here. That was tough coming in as a new person and trying to figure everything out. You bring 4 new council people in here and a new mayor, and we're all still fairly new. 2 of us have only sat here 2 years. I don't think you're doing a service to the citizens. So I would like to put this vote out there. See if the third time's the charm.
Okay. Mr. Benson?
You know, I agree with Ms. Carson. I've had the opportunity to discuss this issue with other elected officials in other cities, and they treat the mayor as a separate member of council, not just another member of the council like we do. I don't have any, and they don't seem to have any problem. In fact, all of them say, oh, yeah, that's the way we want it. You know, we like it that way, a separate member of council. And I know it's probably failed twice, but gambling failed probably more than that. The lottery probably failed more than that before it passed. Tabor failed a couple of times before it passed. If you keep trying and you want something, you think it's right, you keep putting it on the ballot, and it's eventually going to pass. And we have, when was the last time this was on the ballot? Was it November of '06?
Whatever the last election was, because it was when Kathy brought it up.
That was for 3 terms.
That was 3 terms.
2 years ago?
But that was for 3 terms, right?
Right.
Three
I think it's when the county commissioners.
But
Went to 3? Okay.
I think it was the election before our April '07 election. It was the state and federal
The
ballot.
last one was for a council member to be able to serve 3 terms.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
That's what it was.
No, you're right.
But you, in November of '06, I think this was on the ballot, so you can look at the wording of that. And I guess if we want to add to say that if you serve 2 terms as a council member plus another 2 terms as the mayor, you're done, that might be some good language to add too, but I think that would be something, and again, we're not voting to pass anything, we can't. We're just saying, here it is to our people, you vote on it and tell us what you want to do. That's all we're doing.
Mr. Marino?
Councilwoman Carson, I do think you bring up an interesting proposition, particularly the aspect that you don't lose that institutional knowledge in running for the mayorship, but that after you've had your due time, you're done. You can no longer run. I think it's interesting. I do think it's short notice to go to a ballot for this year, but I won't oppose the issue being looked at.
Mr. Diaz?
Councilwoman Carson, can you repeat your proposal again? No? Can't remember it?
Something in the form of replacing the language that's there. And what it would say is that an elected person could serve 2 terms as a council person.
Or mayor? Because are you going to limit him to council then mayor, or can he be mayor and then council?
Oh, I guess either way. Either way. You can serve 2 terms and then run for a separate position. So if you're council, you would run for mayor. I can't see any mayor being willing to run for council after that. But, so.
Okay, so it's just
4,
basically.
you could serve 4 consecutive times, but they had to be different titles. It's no different than what it is right now. We can only sit here for 8 years as a council person. The mayor is term limited at 8 because they compiled.
Thank you, Jesus.
Well, whatever it be, because I mean, I'm not going to disagree. And I don't mean that disrespectful to you. So that he could run again, if he chose to run again as the mayor.
Not this election cycle.
Not this election cycle, no. Nothing will be in effect.
Okay.
Until the following one. But after you've done that and you've completed 16 years, you can never come back and run for any seat here.
Okay. Great. I just wanted clarification because I
Okay.
wanted to make sure I was understanding it correctly.
Mr. Benson?
I would be in favor. I know that Mr. Gaylor is quite capable of drafting the language for this referendum. It wouldn't be the ordinance or the charter language exactly, but I know that you're quite capable of doing that before next Monday night.
Before I undertake that, I have some other questions for you, though.
And let me just make somebody could run for council, then they could run for mayor, then they could run for council again, and then they could run for mayor again. If they wanted to do that, they could, right? As long as it doesn't exceed 16 years, okay? But anyway, I'd like to see this. We're just giving the people the opportunity to look at this and vote on it. I'd like to see it go on the ballot and let the people decide. This time, this election.
So if I may, so if you serve 2 years as a council member, now you're in midterm, and you decide to run for mayor. So he could run for mayor, serve 4 years, and then at the expiration of his term of mayor, he could again run for mayor. Now, at the expiration of his 8 years as mayor, could he come back and run as a city council member then?
That doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess it does everybody else here.
Because that would give him another 4 years.
Yeah.
So he hasn't added up to his 16 with that scenario, so I guess he could.
Yeah.
I'll have to play with that, but if you decide that you're going to do this.
Would it be, and I don't know, because as Mr. Benson has said, when we are out at NLC and CML and you're speaking to other council members, they're all telling you they have that language. Could we just quickly take a look at some of how that reads out there?
Now, the complication is that, and I'm not saying, I mean, I can do this, obviously, but looking at somebody else's charter and their language doesn't really usually cut it, because every city, you know, has their own charter, and so we need to, if we're going to amend ours, we got to make sure that we amend it in every place where it applies. So looking at their charter wording doesn't really help me all that much. I need to, but I can do this if you decide that you want to. I don't want to give the impression that you should make your decision because I'm having trouble drafting your charter amendments here.
Mr. Benson?
Yes, Mr. Gaylor. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not talking about here, we're not talking about term limits, because you'd still be limited to 2 terms on the council, and then you're running for a separate position.
Right.
So you'd have 2 terms as the mayor, so you still couldn't serve 4 terms on the council. You're limited to 2 terms, that's what you're after, isn't it? And then 2 terms as the mayor, for a combination of a total of 16 years. So that's how I envisioned it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bullock?
This sounds like what happened about 6 years ago, that they just separated the mayor from the city council, where it isn't one
Right.
body. Okay, all this other was getting me confused, and I'm thinking, this is the same election that we had, I think it was either 2005 or 2006. And it's just to say that the mayor is a separate position from council. So if you wanted to run for council and then go to mayor, you weren't being limited but from the fact of your time on council.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, that's.
Okay. Mr. Marino, okay with Mr. Gaylor putting that together? You'll still have a chance to vote yes or no when we see it.
Yes.
Mr. Benson?
Yes.
Ms. Carson?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mr. Bullock? I would say put something together, and then there'll be one more vote to say, yeah, do it or not do it, or change it. I'm going to vote no, only because I want these people to go back to the farm and work again. I don't want professional politicians. That's my opinion.
It's going to be in the form of an ordinance that on the 15th you have to adopt one way or the other, but of course you can amend the ordinance when it's in front of you by deleting ballot question 4,
Yep.
if that's the way you end up going.
But I would imagine it's going to pass, no problem. So, okay, Ms. Carson, you okay? You're all right? Okay, it's now 10:20. Some of us are getting headaches and going on, so can we kind of push through this for the rest of this meeting? Because we have another meeting coming afterwards. So if you have stuff that just absolutely does not have to be handled tonight, I think all of us would approve, would really appreciate that. So, next item on the agenda is Administrative Council business. Mr. Benson.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question about, I don't think we have a formal annexation policy, and I would like to have the council, by consensus, refer that issue to the staff so that the staff can study that and come up with an annexation policy, because there are some things that might be in the work right now, and we need to have some sort of a standardized policy.
I don't know what that means.
Well, I think Mr. Benson mentioned it to me last week. There's a number of pending annexations. Some are specific to infill, some are specific to expanding the boundaries. Some might be related to land use, landowners that are interested in coming in. But usually when you form a annexation policy, you don't want to do hostile annexations, and that's one thing that we've had in the past. But that was because it was a enclave, an island. All legal, it was all defensible, but I think forming a better policy on how we approach that would be a good thing, and so I don't think there's a problem. We could probably come back with a policy.
Okay. Anybody on council have a challenge with that, rather than Ms. Good? Ms. Carson.
Do you need a policy if it's like saying we don't support forced annexation? Is that the policy?
That would absolutely be a tenet in that, yes.
It would be?
It would be a tenet, yes. You would say, we would only extend our boundaries through logical annexation. We would not do a hostile annexation. I mean, there would be a number of those types of things that would be in it.
I'd vote no on that then.
But that's for your discussion. I think the request is to come back with some policy.
Huh? Yeah, another night. Fine, look at it and bring it back.
Yep.
Is that a problem? Anybody have a problem, Ms. Carson? Just a problem with bringing it back, because I would side with you on that particular item. Do you have anything else, Mr.?
Yes, I'll combine my report. I just have one thing. We have our Ward 2
No,
meeting.
that's reports. We're just administrative
Right,
council
I just wanted to
business.
get it all over with, but that's okay.
Okay.
You can come back.
What?
Because there's something else I want to say about that meeting.
Go ahead.
Okay. We're having our Ward 2 meeting tomorrow night, the second Tuesday of the month, at Stellado's Grocery, 104th and Chambers at 6 o'clock. And at this meeting, we're going to have a member of the Park and Recreation staff so that they can get input from members of our community in the Northern Range about the bike and pedestrian trail plan. So I've been telling a lot of people about that. I hope we'll have a good turnout tomorrow evening, but that's when it'll be at Stellato, 6 p.m. tomorrow. Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Bullock?
Well, if this is the time, it is not a report, it was a compliment to the park staff on how well every park in the city looks. I don't know a year that I've gone by every park and every one of them is outstanding. And so I just want to give the kudos out to the park staff that I don't know if they're doing it like those little elves did with the shoes, but they're working day and night, and those parks are looking good. And we haven't had no rain in a while, and I haven't seen them watering it, so I'm wondering how they're pulling this off. But thank you to the park staff.
Okay. Mine is probably administrative business because it's got to take a council decision. I'm a little concerned. We had a citizen go to a candidate, and this candidate, citizen went to the candidate with a problem. This candidate then gave this citizen the wrong information and referred them to someone other than the city manager for a decision that should have been made in his office. What I would like this council to do is to make a direction maybe to Mr. Flannery, and that he would send to his staff that says, his staff has the right to tell people, you know what, you got to talk to the city manager on these. This candidate tried to circumvent the system to get around both staff and the city manager, and it's not the way work should be done in this city. It's not the way work's been done for 4 years.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I can assure you that staff knows that already.
Okay. So I don't need a decision from council then,
No.
and we just skip right over that. Okay, let's go to reports. Mr. Marino. Mr. Benson. Ms. Carson.
No report.
Ms. Snyder. No report. Whoa, we're going to be okay. Mr. Diaz.
I got a few, just kidding, no reports.
Mr. Bullock.
We had a big, long discussion tonight on it, so.
Yes. Oh, you have guts.
Mr. Flannery, there's a gentleman up in Union that wants to talk to the police chief and you about a four-way stop up there by Landmark School curve, because they are having a lot of traffic that comes around that curve, which is a line curve in down the school, that says that they're doing U-back, and he would like to get with you and everything, and I'm going to get with them. Matter of fact, I got drawings and everything of the whole thing, so I'm going to give it to you.
Is that it?
That's it.
All right. What? Okay. The only thing I want to add, and it's going to be real short, is for the people out there, start looking at your particular life. I know there are a lot of people out there who have it bad. But take a look at your life, and if you've got a job and you've got your job is secure and everything seems to be going okay, don't fall in with these people. 634 points today, that's crazy. That's people thinking the world is falling. Start looking at yourself. You know, you may be one of the lucky ones. And if you're not one of the lucky ones, I apologize, and I hope there's things we can do for you. But I know there's probably more of us out there that are doing fine. We're not rich. We're not getting by with everything we want, but we have everything we need. That's all I've got, Mr. Flannery.
I'll be quick. Signed the AFSCME agreement tonight, had a signing ceremony in the foyer, and then that's it.
Mr. Gaylor. Okay, don't anybody leave. There'd be no further report before this board. Meeting adjourned. We're going to go to the GID, and I'll give you a minute, and you tell us when you're ready, Ms. Bauer.
Carson?
She stepped out of the room, but she's here.
Teeter? Diaz?
Here.
McEldowney? Bullock?
Here.
Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. There's only one set of minutes before the GID board this evening for approval. Are the minutes of the meeting of July 18th, 2001. Before voting on the minutes of July 18th, July 18th, 2011. Before voting on the minutes of July 18th, 2011, I need a motion to allow Board Member Marino to abstain from voting because of his excused absence. I'll now entertain that motion. Ms. Snyder.
Move to allow Councilman Moreno to abstain from meeting minutes of July 18, 2011.
Mr. Benson.
Second.
It's been approved. It's been motion and second to allow Board Member Marino to abstain from voting on the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 18th, 2011. Ms. Snyder.
Move approval of the regular GID meeting minutes July 18, 2011. Council is seated.
Mr. Benson.
Second.
Had a motion and a second to approve the minutes of July 18th, 2011. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. Voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. There's one item under consent on the agenda this evening. I'm now open to a motion to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Benson?
Yes, move to approve the consent agenda.
Ms. Snyder?
Second the motion.
Had a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Will the city attorney please read the title of the items included on the consent agenda?
Title of ordinance GID 150-11 reads as follows: an ordinance amending the 2011 budget of the Commerce City Northern Infrastructure General Improvement District by appropriating a portion of the unencumbered fund balance of the Commerce City Northern Infrastructure General Improvement District in the amount of $103,000 for the water ERU credit purchase and authorizing the expenditure thereof.
Okay, I've had a motion and a second. City attorney has read the title. Need a roll call vote, please.
Moreno? Yes. Benson? Carson?
Yes.
Snyder?
Yes.
Natal?
Yes.
Diaz?
Yes.
Bullock? Yes. The vote is 7 aye, no nay.
Thank you very much. Motion passes. There be no further business to come before this board. We'll be adjourned. Everybody drive safe going home. You know, once we got into the swing of this, we got